Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Snoozy Scientist, where we gently wander through the mysteries of science, one sleepy yawn at a time. Whether you're listening from the comfort of your bed, wrapped in a blanket, or floating in that dreamy space between waking and sleeping, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're traveling to the farthest edge of our planet, into a realm colder, lonelier, and more untouched than any place humans have ever called home. A realm where the ocean doesn't just challenge what we think life can endure, it challenges what we think life should look like. Antarctica, down here, beneath ice older than civilization itself, the ocean harbors creatures that feel as if they've stepped out of another world. In these frozen waters, small creatures don't stay small. They stretch, they thicken, they grow. In the shallow, divers have seen sea spiders the size of dinner plates drifting slowly past them. Amphipods, nearly invisible in most oceans, here they swell until they nearly fill a human hand. Nematode worms extending longer than a person's arm, and jellyfish drifting with tentacles that trail so far into the blue that their ends disappear as if they're descending into another world. None of this is ancient history. These are living creatures thriving right now in the coldest ocean on Earth. And the more scientists explore these waters, the more the pattern repeats itself, not in one species or two, but across entire food webs. Every expedition into the Southern Ocean returns with another puzzle piece, with each discovery deepening the mystery rather than solving it. Something about this frozen world is bending the rules of biology on a scale we're only beginning to grasp. But what force in these cold, silent waters nudges life towards such extraordinary size? Why do creatures that stay tiny everywhere else on Earth become giants here? Tonight, we're going to drift slowly into this mystery. But before we begin, if you enjoy videos like this, slow, soothing, and quietly filled with wonder, I'd love it if you gave this one a like and maybe tapped subscribe. It helps more curious minds like you find their way to this peaceful little corner of the internet and lets the algorithm know that sleep and science go perfectly together. And if you'd be so kind, let me know in the comments, where are you winding down from tonight and what time is it there? It's always a joy to see how far across the world this little sleepy corner of science travels. Now take a deep breath, let your shoulders soften, and together let's begin our descent into the frozen world beneath the Antarctic ice. For a long moment, let us drift away from the creatures themselves and turn our attention to the world that shaped them. Before any giant amphipod ever stretched its limbs in the cold blue light, something far larger had already begun to transform the planet. It did not happen in a single moment. It unfolded slowly across spans of time so wide that even mountains seemed restless by comparison. There was once an age when Antarctica was not the frozen realm we know today. It sat among other continents, joined in a vast southern landmass, sharing rivers, forests, and the slow traffic of life. Warm winds moved across its surface. Ancient reptiles walked where glaciers now rest. Nothing about it suggested that it would one day become a place almost completely sealed from the rest of the living world. Then the continents began to wander. What starts as an almost imperceptible drift becomes, over tens of millions of years, a great rearranging of the map. Antarctica pulled away from Africa and Australia. Water rushed into the widening spaces between them. Slowly, two narrow channels formed. One near the land we now call South America, and another near Australia. At first, the oceans flowed through these openings, like quiet breaths. Then, as the gaps continued to widen, something extraordinary happened. Currents began to circle Antarctica without interruption. There were no longer any continents blocking their path. The water could travel endlessly around the southern world, unbroken and unpaused. Over time, this became the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a moving ring of cold water that now wraps the continent like a liquid wall. It is the strongest current on Earth, carrying more water than all the planet's rivers combined. Yet from the surface, it seems almost silent, as if hiding the scale of its power beneath a calm gray skin. This current did more than reshape the ocean, it reshaped life. By circling Antarctica without touching warmer regions to the north, it locked the continent into its own climate. Warm water could not easily reach it, heat could not linger. The world below froze slowly, then deeply, until ice settled over the land and stayed. What began as a shift in ocean pathways became a long descent into cold that has never truly reversed. With the current in place, Antarctica entered a kind of solitude. Other continents continued to exchange species through land bridges and narrow seas. Birds, mammals, insects, and plants migrated, mixed, and changed together. But Antarctica remained apart, drifting through time almost untouched by newcomers. Millions of years passed. The animals and plants that once lived on the continent disappeared as the land froze. The ocean, however, told a different story. Here, in the surrounding waters, isolation did not mean emptiness, it meant stability. Year after year, century after century, the temperatures barely changed. The water stayed cold but predictable. Seasons arrived, but their rhythm remained steady. Storms swept across the surface, yet below a certain depth the world stayed quiet. While other oceans warmed and cooled through ice ages and interglacial periods, the Southern Ocean held its breath. It is this steadiness that sets Antarctica apart. Most of the planet's ecosystems are shaped by change, by the push and pull of shifting climates and competing species. In contrast, the waters around Antarctica formed something closer to a sealed evolutionary laboratory, a place where life could follow unusual paths without interruption from the outside world. There were no sudden arrivals of fast predators from warmer seas. There were no invasive species carried by river systems or drifting land masses. Evolution moved at its own patient pace. Isolation does not simply limit what enters a place, it also shapes what survives. In these waters, species adapted to the cold and learned how to use it. Their lives became slower. Their metabolism settled into rhythms that matched the icy stillness around them. Generations stretched across long spans of time. Instead of quick bursts of competition, life leaned toward endurance. Over millions of years, this combination of solitude and stability created ecosystems that look unlike any others on Earth. The Southern Ocean holds species that have no close relatives elsewhere. Some lineages have persisted through ancient climate cycles, surviving changes that erased entire families of animals on other continents. The result is a living record of adaptation shaped not by isolation alone, but by constancy. Even the temperature itself played a quiet role. Cold water can hold more oxygen than warm water, and here the chill remained unbroken for longer than many other marine environments. Life did not need to race through each day to survive. The conditions allowed slow growth, long lives, and fragile body structures that would collapse in stormier, warmer seas. In this protected world, even the smallest details mattered, from the crawl of algae beneath the ice to the steady movement of deep currents. What began with drifting continents and the opening of two narrow seaways became one of the most unusual ecological experiments on the planet. A continent frozen in silence, an ocean sealed from the rest of the world, temperatures that changed so slowly that evolution had time to explore possibilities that would be impossible elsewhere. For now, we will simply remain in this quiet understanding, Before the giants appeared, before the mysteries deepened, the foundations were already in place, a world set apart, a current that circles without end, and a cold, stable ocean that has shaped life in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. The cold around Antarctica is not only a feeling, it is a physical force that changes the very chemistry of the sea. In the stillness beneath the ice, something invisible begins to gather, something that will slowly shape the bodies and lives of the creatures that drift and crawl through the water. Oxygen. Not the air that fills our lungs, but the kind dissolved quietly into seawater, held in place by temperature and pressure. To understand why this matters, we have to think in a slower rhythm than we do on land. In warm waters near the equator, molecules move quickly. Water releases gas easily, the way steam rises from a cup on a hot day. But in cold water, everything moves more slowly. The chill tightens the space between molecules, making room for more oxygen to stay dissolved. It is as if the cold ocean holds its breath for longer than the warm seas ever could. Antarctica takes this to an extreme. Here, temperatures hover near the freezing point of salt water, yet the ocean does not turn to solid ice below the surface. Instead, the cold sinks in and remains, creating layers of water filled with more oxygen than almost anywhere else on Earth. Instruments lowered into the Southern Ocean show levels that climb close to saturation, the point where water can hold no more without releasing it again. These readings have been repeated year after year through different expeditions and different seasons. The numbers shift slightly, but the pattern remains the same. The water is rich, almost heavy with dissolved oxygen, from the surface where sunlight fades to the deeper shelves where daylight never arrives. For most creatures in these waters, that oxygen is not just background chemistry, it is life support. Many of the animals that live here do not have lungs or gills in the way we imagine. They draw oxygen directly through their skin or through delicate tissues stretched across their bodies. In warmer seas, that method becomes a limitation. There is simply not enough oxygen in the water to allow such structures to grow very large. Small bodies have more surface area compared to their volume, which means more opportunity for oxygen to diffuse inward. As size increases, that balance changes, and diffusion alone cannot provide what the animal needs. But in the Antarctic, the rules shift. With so much oxygen available, the boundary that usually keeps soft bodied species small begins to loosen. The water carries what their tissues require, even as their bodies grow. Creatures with slow metabolisms and simple anatomy can continue adding length or thickness without reaching the point where their oxygen supply fails. It is not that the cold creates giants on its own, it simply removes one of the usual limits, allowing evolution to explore shapes and sizes that would not survive elsewhere. Scientists studying these waters have often returned to this idea. Oxygen seems like an obvious starting point. It explains why species that rely on diffusion can reach surprising dimensions. It matches what researchers measure in the field, and it lines up with laboratory experiments, showing that when oxygen levels drop, growth slows or stops entirely. Yet each time the data is examined more closely, the explanation feels both convincing and incomplete. Some animals in Antarctica use oxygen in ways that seem perfectly suited to their environment. Their bodies are thin, their limbs long and delicate, allowing oxygen to flow in across a wide surface. Others have blood rich in proteins that carry oxygen efficiently, even at low temperatures where chemical reactions crawl at a slow pace. There are species here that seem almost sculpted by the cold, built to take advantage of the abundance around them. And still, not every organism becomes large. Some remain small, even with the same access to oxygen as their oversized neighbors. The puzzle grows deeper when scientists look beyond Antarctica. High oxygen levels can also be found in other cold regions of the world, yet gigantism there is far less extreme. The Arctic, for example, shares low temperatures and long seasons of ice, but its animals rarely reach the same remarkable proportions. Something is different in the Southern Ocean, something beyond oxygen alone. Even within Antarctica, the pattern is uneven. Some species that rely on oxygen diffusion become enormous, while others stay modest in size. If oxygen were the only factor, the trend would be more universal. Instead, it appears as a thread woven through a much larger tapestry. The cold holds the oxygen in place, but it also slows metabolism, extends lifespans, and changes how quickly energy is used. Predators are fewer in these waters, and food arrives in cycles of feast and scarcity. The environment remains steady across vast stretches of time, giving evolution room to wander without interruption. For now, oxygen serves as the first clear clue, a starting point rather than an answer. It explains how certain species can grow without suffocating in their own bodies. It helps us understand why delicate structures do not collapse under the demands of survival. But the giants of Antarctica are not built from a single cause. The mystery reaches farther than a single measurement or a single property of water. In the quiet cold beneath the ice, oxygen is simply one part of a deeper story, waiting patiently in the background, like breath held in a place where time moves slowly and nothing is rushed. In the cold waters surrounding Antarctica, the silence is not empty. It is filled with bodies that move slowly through the blue, shaped by a world that allows them to grow in ways that seem almost impossible. For a long time, these creatures remained unseen. Divers rarely reached such remote places, and cameras that could withstand the icy depths came only recently. Now, as we look more closely, the Southern Ocean begins to reveal its residents, one shape at a time. Among the first to draw attention are the amphipods. Elsewhere in the world, their relatives are small enough to settle unnoticed in a pinch of sand. In tropical shallows, they slip through grains of sediment like tiny punctuation marks in the story of the sea. In Antarctica, the same family of animals becomes something entirely different. Their bodies lengthen and broaden until they resemble miniature crustaceans that seem almost out of scale with the world around them. Their legs are long and careful, lifting them through the water in slow motion. Each movement looks unhurried, as if the rhythm of the cold has settled into their muscles. These amphipods do not rush or dart the way their smaller relatives do in warmer oceans. Instead, they drift, turning gently in the current, as if carried by thought rather than effort. Their shells are pale, sometimes almost glass-like, reflecting the faint light that filters through the surface ice. When researchers collect them, the comparison becomes impossible to ignore. Side by side, an amphipod from a temperate sea looks like a scaled down version, a distant echo of the giant at hand. Scientists often describe the difference as several times in size, not a slight increase, but a transformation that feels more like a shift in the rules of biology. Another creature that lives beneath the ice has drawn curiosity for more than a century. Sea spiders glide across the sea floor on thin, spindly legs that seem too delicate to support their bodies. They are not true spiders, yet their movements evoke the same quiet precision. In most oceans, they are small enough to rest unnoticed on a shell or rock. Here they grow large enough that their legs stretch into wide circles as they move. Their bodies remain small compared to the span of their limbs, giving them a shape that feels both fragile and eerily efficient. These sea spiders breathe through their skin. The oxygen diffuses through their legs, carried through the body by a simple system that would fail in warmer, less oxygen rich waters. In the Antarctic, that method becomes not only adequate, but advantageous. Their size is not a burden, it is a function of the environment itself. Watching one walk across the sea floor is like observing a slow star drifting across a dark sky, each leg rising and settling with unhurried grace. Deeper still, hidden in the soft sediment, are the Nemertean worms. They are ribbon like animals, smooth and unsegmented, moving in graceful waves as they navigate the cold darkness. In most parts of the world, Nemerteans are modest in length, growing only as much as their surroundings allow. In the Southern Ocean, some stretch so far that their bodies curve again and again across the seafloor, looping like drawn lines that refuse to end. Their colors can range from pale cream to deep red, depending on the species, and their skin glistens as if coated with a thin sheen of melted ice. These worms are predators. Though their hunting is quiet, they extend a slender proboscis to capture prey, a structure that can unfurl unexpectedly like a ribbon released from a spool. In warmer seas, such behavior goes unnoticed because the animals themselves are small. In Antarctica, the same action becomes mesmerizing, not because it is aggressive, but because it unfolds slowly in such a large body. When scientists describe their size, they compare them to relatives elsewhere that reach only a fraction of their length. The Antarctic versions seem to rewrite the limits that usually govern soft bodied animals. Floating above these layers of life are the jellyfish. Some are translucent bells, pulsing gently through the dim water. Others glow with soft colors when light touches them. Their tentacles trail behind in fluid threads that drift as though stirred by distant tides. In temperate oceans, jellyfish are often brief presences, small and easily carried by currents. In the Southern Ocean, certain species grow to surprising dimensions. Their bells expand until they resemble drifting skylights in the dark, and their trailing tentacles stretch far beyond what their warm water relatives ever achieve. The calm waters beneath the ice allow these tentacles to remain intact. In rougher seas, such delicate structures would tear or tangle. Here, the environment protects them, giving them space to lengthen over time. The difference is not simply one of scale, but of possibility. A jellyfish from warmer waters might be measured in inches, while its Antarctic counterpart can reach lengths many times greater, turning slow movement into an art of patience. Seen together, these creatures do not feel like isolated exceptions. They form a pattern spread across the food web, from scavengers to predators to drifting filter feeders. Each one shows a similar shift when compared to relatives elsewhere. The change is not subtle. It is as though the Antarctic has taken familiar forms and allowed them to expand, testing how far a body can grow when the environment removes certain limits. For now, we remain with the images of these giants moving through the quiet cold. Amphipods gliding like pale boats across the seafloor, sea spiders stepping gently through the stillness, ribbon like worms folding across the sediment, jellyfish rising and falling as if breathing with the ocean itself. In this frozen world, size becomes not a rarity, but a recurring shape in the long story of life beneath the ice. In the cold waters that surround Antarctica, some of the most striking giants are also some of the quietest. They do not swim quickly or flash bright colors. Instead, they move with a patience that seems older than the ice itself. Among these creatures are the sea spiders, animals so unusual that even their basic design challenges what we expect from life in the ocean. Sea spiders are not true spiders. They belong to a distant branch of the animal tree, one that has been reshaped again and again across deep time. At first glance, they seem almost too simple to survive in such a harsh world. Their bodies are small, sometimes no larger than a coin, while their legs stretch outward in long and delicate lines. The space between those legs gives them an airy shape, as if they were built more from emptiness than from flesh. What makes them truly strange is not what they have, but what they lack. Most marine animals rely on structures that move water across respiratory surfaces. Fish draw oxygen in through gills, pulling it from the sea with each breath. Crabs and other crustaceans pump water past feathery internal organs that act as exchange systems. Sea spiders have neither. There are no lungs hidden within their small bodies. There are no gills tucked beneath plates of armor. Instead, they depend entirely on the surface of their skin to take in oxygen. This is only possible because their legs are more than limbs. They are the main surface through which oxygen enters the body. Inside each leg, a network of tiny tubes carries fluid that transports oxygen to the internal organs. In warm seas, this system would place strict limits on size. As a body grows larger, the distance between its outer surface and its inner tissues increases. Diffusion becomes slower, and oxygen may not reach the center quickly enough. That is why most animals that breathe in this simple way remain small. Yet in the Southern Ocean, those limits begin to soften. The water is rich in dissolved oxygen, held in place by the intense cold. With so much available, sea spiders can grow without reaching the point where their supply becomes inadequate. Their long, narrow legs increase the surface area through which oxygen can enter. As the legs lengthen, the breathing capacity grows with them. Their unusual design, which seems fragile elsewhere, becomes a perfect match for the environment. Scientists studying these animals often remark on how well their body plan scales in the Antarctic. Instead of struggling against the demands of a larger size, sea spiders expand gracefully. Their organs adjust to the changing proportions. Some species even shift the placement of their digestive system so that it branches into their legs. When food breaks down, the energy does not need to travel far. It moves through the limbs themselves, reducing the strain that a larger body would normally create. This arrangement would be unthinkable in warmer waters. Higher temperatures speed up metabolism. Animals living in such places need more oxygen to support the faster pace of life. A sea spider with an oversized body would reach its limits quickly and fail. In the Antarctic, the cold slows everything down. Chemical reactions unfold at a gentler speed, and the need for oxygen decreases. With the water supplying more than enough, the sea spiders are able to grow without rushing. Their size becomes a reflection of the environment rather than a struggle against it. Because of this, sea spider gigantism has become one of the strongest and most consistent signals of the Antarctic ecosystem. While some species in these waters remain small, the pattern among sea spiders is unusually widespread. In many locations, divers report seeing individuals so large that their legs span across both hands. Side by side with their relatives from temperate seas, the contrast is immediate. The difference is not subtle, but dramatic, as though two different worlds shape the same body in different ways. What makes the pattern even more compelling is how long it has persisted. Fossils suggest that sea spiders have existed for hundreds of millions of years. Their basic shape has changed very little, which means that the environment, rather than the animal, has been the variable. In stable, cold, oxygen-rich conditions, the design thrives. In warmer places, the same design remains small. This consistency has led many researchers to consider sea spiders a living indicator of the forces at work in the Antarctic. Their presence also hints at the deeper story unfolding beneath the ice. Not all organisms take advantage of the opportunities offered by the Southern Ocean. Some remain modest in size, even with access to the same resources. Sea spiders, however, seem uniquely suited to the combination of high oxygen, slow metabolism, and stable temperature. Their anatomy, which appears limiting elsewhere, becomes almost elegant in its efficiency. Watching a sea spider walk across the sea floor reveals none of the complexity hidden within its frame. The legs lift and fall in a slow rhythm. barely disturbing the sediment. The body drifts forward, supported not by strength, but by balance. It is an animal shaped by patience rather than speed, by the quiet chemistry of cold water rather than the demands of a crowded reef. For now, the sea spiders remain one of the clearest windows into how the Antarctic bends the rules of life. Their size is not an accident. It is a response to conditions that have held steady for longer than human history can measure. In a place where the ocean breathes differently, their bodies have learned to grow in ways that reveal just how deeply the environment can guide evolution. Far below the surface of the Southern Ocean, there are moments when the seafloor appears to shift. At first, it seems like the movement of stirred sediment or the passing shadow of a drifting current. Then the shapes come into focus. Small bodies, but not as small as expected, begin to reveal themselves. Legs move in deliberate strokes, and shells catch faint light in pale flashes. These are amphipods, creatures found in almost every ocean on Earth, yet in Antarctica they do not resemble the versions familiar to the rest of the world. In most seas, amphipods are tiny. They live tucked between grains of sand or cling to drifting algae, their presence easy to miss unless a magnifying lens brings them into view. They feed quietly, scavenge along rocks, and slip through narrow spaces with quick, darting motions. Their size elsewhere is measured in millimeters, so light that a gentle current can lift them like dust. For decades, marine biologists catalog them as ordinary and unremarkable, part of the invisible foundation that keeps ocean ecosystems functioning without drawing attention. But in the cold waters surrounding Antarctica, the pattern breaks. The same group of animals grows several times larger, sometimes reaching lengths that would be unthinkable in warmer regions. When researchers first brought these Antarctic amphipods to the surface, the comparison was startling. Two animals from the same family, placed side by side, looked as if they belonged to entirely different chapters of Earth's history. One was small enough to balance on a fingernail, the other filled the palm of a hand. Scientists did not stop at observation. They wanted to know why. So they designed experiments that explored the conditions these animals experienced in their natural environment. Amphipods from Antarctic waters were kept at slightly warmer temperatures to see how they would respond. Others were placed in water where oxygen levels were carefully adjusted. The results began to reveal a delicate truth. Temperature, even a small shift, changed everything. When the water surrounding these amphipods warmed by only a few degrees, their bodies struggled. Some stopped growing. Others showed signs of stress, moving less and feeding less. It was not dramatic or sudden, but a gradual unraveling, as if the cold that shaped them had been gently taken away. In many cases, the animals did not survive long-term exposure to these warmer conditions. Their physiology, finely tuned to the pace of icy water, could not keep up with the faster chemical reactions triggered by heat. This sensitivity surprised researchers. Amphipods elsewhere in the world tolerate a wide range of temperatures. They live in tropical bays and shallow temperate coastlines. They crawl through deep-sea mud where cold currents flow slowly past them. But the Antarctic giants are specialists. Their size is possible only because the environment around them is remarkably stable, offering a rare combination of cold and oxygen that holds steady through long stretches of time. Oxygen became the next part of the puzzle. Amphipods do not breathe through lungs. Instead, oxygen enters their bodies across thin surfaces, carried inward by circulating fluids. In small animals, that process works efficiently. But as size increases, the distance from surface to center grows, and diffusion alone may not be enough. That is why most amphipods remain small. Their anatomy is not built to support large bodies in environments where oxygen is limited. Yet in the Southern Ocean, Oxygen is abundant. The cold allows the water to hold more of it, and currents mix the deep and shallow layers, distributing it widely. In laboratory tanks, when oxygen levels were lowered even slightly, the Antarctic amphipods reacted immediately. Their movements slowed, their ability to feed declined. Some shrank over time, unable to maintain their size. It was as if their bodies were balanced on a narrow ledge, supported only while conditions remained perfect. In contrast, when oxygen levels stayed high and the water remained cold, their size did not create strain. It felt almost effortless, a natural state rather than a biological stretch. The same experiments showed that amphipods from warmer regions did not grow larger when placed in high oxygen conditions alone. They remained small, revealing that oxygen is necessary for Antarctic gigantism, but not enough to produce it in species unadapted to the cold. What emerged from these studies was not a single explanation, but a relationship. The giants of Antarctica are not simply large because the water is cold, nor only because it is rich in oxygen. Their size exists where both conditions overlap, reinforcing one another. The cold slows metabolism, reducing the demand for oxygen. The oxygen, held in place by the temperature, makes larger bodies possible. Remove either part of the equation, and the balance collapses. This fragile dependence has made amphipods one of the clearest markers of how life responds to subtle changes. They show, in their quiet way, how finely tuned an organism can become to its environment. A few degrees of warmth or a slight drop in oxygen does not sound dramatic, yet for these creatures, it can mean the difference between thriving and disappearing. For now, they continue to move slowly across the Antarctic seafloor, their bodies shaped by a world that rarely changes. In their presence, the ocean reveals a truth that is easy to overlook. Sometimes, the smallest animals carry the largest clues, not through loud displays or sudden transformations, but through the silent precision of lives lived in perfect balance. Beneath the frozen surface of Antarctica, there is a world that does not resemble the open ocean at all. Instead of waves and shifting light, the ceiling above is solid, a continuous sheet of sea ice that stretches for miles in every direction. From below, it looks like a pale sky that never moves. The ice softens sound and slows the water, creating an environment unlike any other on Earth. It is here, in this stillness, that many of Antarctica's largest and most delicate creatures find a place to live. The sea ice forms as winter settles across the continent, locking the surface into silence. Even when summer returns, much of the ice remains. Year after year, it does not vanish completely. This consistency creates something rare in the natural world, a roof that protects what lies beneath from storms above. In most oceans, surface winds shape the water constantly. Waves churn, currents collide, and sudden disturbances ripple downward. Under Antarctic ice, those forces are softened. The water moves slowly, as if thinking before taking each step. This ceiling does more than create shelter. It shapes the light. Sunlight reaching the ice is scattered into a soft blue glow that filters gently downward. Instead of sharp beams cutting through the water, the illumination feels like dawn stretched across an entire day. The brightness changes with the seasons, but the rhythm is predictable. During the long winter, darkness settles completely. When spring returns, the first hints of light awaken a quiet transformation. On the underside of the ice, tiny organisms begin to grow. They are algae, small but numerous, forming thin layers that cling to the frozen surface like a microscopic forest. These algae do not need warm water or rapid currents. They thrive in the cold, where the ice provides stable support and keeps them safe from being swept away. As they multiply, they become the foundation of the under-ice food web. Small grazers feed on them, and larger animals feed on, the grazers, creating a chain of life that stretches across the sheltered world below. In warmer oceans, algae usually drift freely, rising and falling with the movement of water. Under Antarctic ice, the attachment to a solid surface allows them to grow slowly and steadily. Their presence maintains life, even when the open sea remains quiet. When fragments break loose and drift downward, they carry energy into deeper layers, feeding organisms that never see the surface at all. In this way, the ice becomes not just a ceiling, but a source of nourishment, quietly supporting life through patience rather than abundance. The calmness beneath the ice allows structures that would be impossible elsewhere to endure. Delicate animals with fragile bodies are able to exist without being torn apart by waves. Jellyfish, with long trailing tentacles, move without interruption. Their cords extend into the water like threads of silk, unbroken by turbulence. In stormier seas, such tentacles would tangle or rupture. Here, they glide through stillness. Even the smallest details of movement are shaped by this environment. Amphipods and other invertebrates crawl across the seafloor or drift in the water column with unusual ease. Their bodies are not forced to resist constant surges. The stability allows energy to be used for growth instead of survival against motion. Over long stretches of time, this gentle setting encourages forms that are larger and more intricate. Fragility becomes an advantage, not a weakness. The ice also moderates temperature. Beneath the frozen surface, the water remains cold but consistent. It does not warm suddenly in summer or cool dramatically in winter. Most seas experience seasonal swings that force organisms to adapt quickly. Under the Antarctic ice, the pace is slower. Every change arrives gradually, giving life space to adjust over time instead of reacting immediately. This constancy is rare in nature, and the creatures living here carry its imprint in their shape and behavior. Some animals use the underside of the ice as a pathway. Sea spiders and small starfish crawl across the frozen ceiling as if it were simply another surface of the ocean. Fish with antifreeze proteins in their blood swim through the near-freezing water without difficulty. They do not need to search for shelter from storms because the ice has already created one. Their world is protected not by hiding places, but by the absence of disturbance. The under-ice ecosystem also extends downward into the quiet midwater and deep shelf. Snow-like particles of organic matter drift slowly from above. These falling fragments move at a pace set by the calm water, settling gently instead of sinking fast. Creatures waiting below do not chase rapid currents. They collect what arrives, shaped by rhythms that have remained steady for long periods of time. For many of the giants found in Antarctica, this peaceful world provides the conditions that allow size to flourish. A fragile body can grow larger when the surroundings do not tear it apart. A slow metabolism can stretch across years when the temperature remains steady. Life does not need to hurry. The ocean beneath the ice grants time. In this hidden realm, the sea does not feel empty, it feels patient. The ceiling of ice above is not a barrier. It is a shelter that transforms the water into a calm and enduring world, where even the most delicate forms can expand without breaking. In the deep cold surrounding Antarctica, life moves at a pace that is almost impossible to notice unless you are willing to slow yourself to match it. Nothing in these waters is rushed. Even the smallest actions seem stretched across long strands of time, as if the ocean has whispered a different set of instructions to the creatures that live here. Cold changes more than temperature. It changes chemistry itself. Every living thing depends on reactions happening inside its cells, tiny exchanges of energy that allow muscles to contract, food to break down, and growth to continue. In warm environments, those reactions unfold quickly. Heat gives molecules extra motion, helping them collide and interact at a faster rate. A fish in tropical water burns energy rapidly, needing to eat often just to keep its body running. In the Antarctic, the opposite is true. The water is so cold that chemical reactions slow to a gentle crawl. The molecules move with less urgency, as if wrapped in a quiet hush. This means that animals do not need energy at the same speed as their warmer relatives. Their bodies operate like clocks that tick softly, using fuel with remarkable efficiency. A heartbeat can slow, respiration can drift into long pauses, and still the organism remains alive and steady. This slower pace has profound effects on lifespan. In many parts of the world, small creatures live short lives, growing quickly and reproducing before predators or changing conditions can catch up with them. In the Southern Ocean, where cold remains constant, something different happens. Years do not push organisms forward with urgency. Instead, they stretch. Some invertebrates that would survive only a handful of seasons elsewhere can live for decades here. Their cells divide more slowly, their tissues age gradually, and their bodies carry time the way the ice carries light, gently and without hurry. Researchers studying these species often describe a kind of biological patience. A creature might take several years to reach maturity, spending long periods in juvenile stages without strain. Growth is not a race, it is an unfolding. Because their metabolisms are slow, these animals do not require large amounts of food at once. They can wait through lean periods, storing energy in small amounts and using it carefully. In a place where the seasons shift between abundance and scarcity, this ability is not only useful, it is essential. Slow growth also changes what the body can become. In warmer waters, rapid growth demands high energy, which limits size. A large body requires more oxygen, more food, and faster circulation. Many organisms cannot meet those demands and remain small. In the cold Antarctic, the reduced energy requirements allow bodies to expand without overwhelming the system that supports them. Tissues can lengthen gradually, layer by layer, over long stretches of time. A creature does not need to build itself quickly, it can build itself well. This is one of the hidden reasons that gigantism appears here, not as a sudden leap, but as a quiet accumulation. A sea spider that grows slowly can add millimeters over many seasons, remaining perfectly balanced with its environment. An amphipod can increase its mass without needing to double its food intake. A Nemertean worm can extend its body at a pace that matches the rhythm of the seafloor. Over years, these increments become transformation. The animal is not oversized because it forced itself to be. It is oversized because nothing around it demanded that it stop. The cold also protects the energy that would otherwise be lost. Heat accelerates decay, breaking down tissues and wearing out biological machinery. In the Southern Ocean, the chill preserves cells longer, reducing the rate of damage. A longer-lived organism has more time to grow, reproduce, and endure. It becomes part of a cycle where life is not measured by speed, but by persistence. Even the heartbeat of the ecosystem reflects this. Tempo. Microorganisms that form the first steps of the food web grow slowly beneath the ice. Predators that feed on them wait with the same patience. Movements are deliberate rather than frantic. Nothing wastes energy because none of it can be replaced quickly. The calm water helps, but the deeper cause lies within the bodies themselves, shaped by the chemistry of cold. Scientists sometimes describe Antarctic metabolism as a low flame that never goes out. It burns steadily, without flickering high or collapsing low. The creatures here are not dormant, they are simply tuned to a different scale of time. Their lives are stretched rather than compressed, and this stretching creates space for forms that are rare elsewhere. To watch these animals is to witness a world where survival is not about rapid change, it is about endurance. a rhythm measured not in hours or days, but in seasons and years. In this slow motion existence, the Antarctic does not rush its inhabitants. It allows them to grow with the same patience that shapes the ice, creating bodies that reflect the quiet strength of the cold. In many places around the world, the shallow ocean is a restless arena. Predators move through the water with speed and precision. Schools of fish scatter in sudden flashes. Crabs hide beneath rocks. Small animals remain small, because staying unnoticed can mean staying alive. But in the waters surrounding Antarctica, the story unfolds differently. Here, the cold shapes not only the bodies of the creatures that live beneath the ice, but also the list of animals that never arrived or could not remain. The shallow zones near the continent are quiet compared to similar regions elsewhere. There are few hunters capable of rapid pursuit. The water is too cold for many fast swimmers, and the stability that defines this place keeps large predators from cycling in and out as they do in more changeable seas. Fish that rely on speed struggle in temperatures that hover near freezing. Their muscles cannot produce the bursts of motion needed for chasing prey. Sharks that dominate warmer coastlines are scarce here. Reptiles that once swam in ancient southern oceans disappeared long before the continent settled into its frozen state. Even many shell-crushing predators, common in temperate regions, are absent. The environment favors slow endurance rather than sudden attack. Because of this, the creatures that remain are not forced into constant alertness. They do not need to compress their bodies into armored shapes or keep their size small enough to hide among stones. They can afford to take up more space, to grow into forms that might be too conspicuous elsewhere. A world with fewer enemies becomes a world where vulnerability carries less risk. The absence of fast predators is partly a result of isolation. When Antarctica separated from other continents long ago, the development of the Antarctic circumpolar current sealed the Southern Ocean into its own system. Species that could not tolerate the cold were filtered out over time. Those that might have arrived from warmer waters were blocked or discouraged by the distance and conditions. While other parts of the planet experienced waves of newcomers, the Antarctic remained relatively closed. Isolation alone does not explain everything. The cold itself slows the movement of animals. Even creatures with the ability to swim quickly in temperate waters find their speed reduced here. Muscles contract more slowly in low temperatures. Nerves send signals at a different pace. A predator that depends on rapid acceleration cannot succeed in these conditions. Instead, the dominant fish are those that use stillness instead of speed, drifting rather than chasing. With fewer hunters in the shallows, the food web shifts. Animals that would normally be preyed upon with frequency can live longer. They do not need to reproduce as rapidly, nor do they need to spend their short lives fleeing. Their energy can be directed toward growth rather than escape. Over generations, this leads to bodies that expand in ways they would not elsewhere. A creature that does not need to hide can try shapes that are larger, softer, and more fragile. In other parts of the world, predation pressure keeps body sizes balanced. Coral reefs, for example, are full of swift fish and sharp-eyed hunters. Small crustaceans must remain miniature to survive, slipping into crevices or burying themselves in sand. Kelp forests along temperate coasts are patrolled by sea otters and fish that crack shells with ease. In such places, an oversized amphipod would not last long. A large, slow worm would be discovered quickly. Even jellyfish with long trailing tentacles risk being torn apart by constant encounter. The comparison highlights something subtle about Antarctica. It is not simply that animals here are allowed to grow, it is that they are not interrupted while doing so. Growth can unfold across years without sudden loss. This is one of the quiet advantages of living in a place where danger arrives rarely and slowly. Evolution can explore forms that are not defensive. It can favor size over speed and delicacy over armor. The few predators that do exist in Antarctic waters tend to be slow themselves. Some fish feed by hovering patiently above the seafloor, waiting for movement rather than chasing it. Starfish and certain larger invertebrates consume prey that cannot escape quickly, but their approach does not demand rapid response. Even seals, which are efficient hunters in the open water, spend little time in the shallow, ice covered regions where most of the giants live. Because predation is limited, the balance between life and death is shaped by other forces. Temperature, oxygen, and food cycles play larger roles than pursuit. Creatures are not forced into constant alertness or sudden flight. They live according to the rhythm of the water rather than the speed of fear. This does not mean the Antarctic is free from struggle. It simply means that the struggles differ from those in warmer seas. Instead of outrunning danger, animals endure long seasons of scarcity. Instead of hiding from swift jaws, they survive by tolerating cold that would end the lives of most species elsewhere. Their bodies reflect the pressures they face and the absence of others. For now, the shallow Antarctic remains one of the few places where life can become large without inviting destruction. In this quiet space, the ocean does not punish size. It allows it, slowly and without urgency, shaping creatures that seem to belong to a world where time moves differently. Winter in Antarctica does not arrive gently. It settles slowly across the ocean, spreading darkness that lingers for months at a time. The sun sinks below the horizon, and the world beneath the ice enters a long season where light becomes memory rather than presence. In this deep winter, the water grows quieter than before. Movements slow even further, and the life drifting through the sea survives on patience alone. For half the year, the ocean receives almost no sunlight. Without light, the tiny plants of the sea cannot grow. Phytoplankton, the first step in the Antarctic food web, remain dormant or vanish to levels nearly too small to measure. The water becomes clear and empty, as if the ocean has taken a long breath inward. During these months, creatures that depend on food drifting through the water must rely on whatever they have stored within their bodies. There is no steady supply, there is no constant grazing, there is only endurance. Then, when the long darkness begins to lift, the change arrives with remarkable speed. The first return of light does not feel like spring in temperate places. It feels like a quiet transformation. As the sun rises higher on the horizon, the underside of the sea ice brightens with soft blue light. Pockets of meltwater form near the surface, creating layers that remain still enough to trap nutrients. Minerals that rested near the seafloor during winter rise through the water column as mixing currents awaken. Suddenly, the small plants waiting for light begin to multiply. The phytoplankton do not simply return, they bloom. Their numbers increase by staggering amounts in a short period of time, turning the water cloudy with green and brown swirls. From satellites far above the planet, these blooms appear like faint stains spreading outward from the continent. Up close, they transform the ocean into a rich feeding ground, thick with microscopic life. This moment does not last long. The abundance may extend through a single season, sometimes only a few weeks in certain regions. But during that window, every creature in the Antarctic ecosystem responds. Small grazers such as krill rise toward the surface in vast numbers, feeding on the dense layers of phytoplankton. Their bodies become reservoirs of energy, storing fat that will sustain them through the coming months of scarcity. Other animals feed on the krill, passing the stored sunlight up the chain. For many species, this rhythm is not optional, it is the structure of life itself. A short feast must support a long famine. Amphipods, sea spiders, and other invertebrates use the sudden availability of food to grow. Instead of rapid bursts of development, they add mass slowly but steadily, converting the brief summer into years of gradual expansion. Their slow metabolism allows them to stretch this energy over long periods. Even when food becomes scarce again, they do not collapse. Their bodies are designed to wait. Some organisms rely on strategies that seem almost impossible outside these waters. Certain species store energy within thick tissues, turning their bodies into living reserves. Others reduce their activity during winter to near stillness, conserving every fragment of strength. Juveniles may pause their growth entirely, holding their place until the next summer returns. In warmer seas, such delays would be risky. In Antarctica, they are necessary. The shape of the ecosystem reflects this alternating cycle. Predators time their presence to match the availability of prey. Filter feeders open their bodies to collect drifting particles when the water is rich, then close themselves to survive the lean months. Even the ice plays a role. As it melts during summer, it releases iron and other nutrients trapped within it. These nutrients help fuel the blooms, forming a link between the solid world above and the living world below. Compared to ecosystems where food is available year-round, the Antarctic system demands long-term planning from every organism. Coral reefs, for instance, provide constant sources of nourishment. Rivers bring steady flows of nutrients into temperate coastal waters. In such places, life can afford to eat continuously and grow quickly. In the Southern Ocean, the opposite is true. Here, success is measured by the ability to survive long stretches without renewal. This rhythm shapes the body sizes that emerge in these waters. Slow-growing animals can take advantage of occasional abundance without being forced into rapid development. They build themselves gradually, adding to their size over many years instead of rushing toward maturity. Because they do not require constant feeding, they can withstand the long Antarctic winter with minimal energy loss. The brief summer becomes not just a season of feeding, but a foundation for future growth. As the cycle continues year after year, creatures adapt not to the feast alone, but to the balance between abundance and emptiness. They are shaped as much by what is missing as by what is present. Winter gives them the space to slow down, summer gives them the chance to build. The two together create lives that unfold across long spans of time, matching the patience of the ice that surrounds them. In this world, survival is not a sprint. It is a quiet agreement with the seasons, a steady exchange between light and darkness, hunger and renewal, stillness and growth. Across the long history of the Southern Ocean, the world we see today is only one moment in a much older story. The cold that surrounds Antarctica did not settle all at once. It arrived in slow pulses, deepened, faded slightly, and returned again with greater force. Over millions of years, ice advanced and retreated like a tide that moved not across hours, but across ages. During the earliest chapters of this transformation, Antarctica was warmer and connected to other continents by shallow seaways. Forests stood where glaciers now rest, and the oceans around the land were inhabited by species that would not recognize the frozen world that followed. As Earth cooled, the first large sheets of ice began to spread across the continent. Each glaciation did more than freeze the land, it reshaped the ocean. When ice expanded, sea levels fell. Shelves that had once been underwater rose into the air. Habitats disappeared in silence, leaving the creatures that depended on them with only two options: move or endure. Many could not. Entire communities vanished without leaving fossils behind, yet some species survived by retreating into small pockets of stability hidden deep below the reach of the ice. These pockets, known as refuges, became the shelters of evolution. In the coldest phases, when much of the shallow ocean was scraped clean by advancing glaciers, life persisted in scattered basins, submarine canyons, and deeper troughs where temperatures remained steady. When the ice retreated again and the shelves sank back beneath the water, these survivors spread outward, slowly recolonizing the emptiness. This cycle repeated over and over. Each glacial period acted like a reset, erasing large areas of habitat, then offering them back as blank space when the climate warmed. Species that lived here were shaped by this rhythm. Those with fast life cycles struggled to re-establish themselves after each loss. Those that grew slowly and lived longer endured the changes with patience. Their evolutionary pathways stretched across ice ages, linking one world to the next. Because of these repeated resets, Antarctica became a place where survival depended not on speed, but on resilience. The giants that live here today are part of a lineage that passed through these ancient filters. Their ancestors endured times when food was scarce for centuries, when cold reached deeper than ever before, and when habitats disappeared and reformed like distant memories. These pressures favored species that could slow their metabolism, conserve energy, and wait through long periods of stillness. Fossil evidence from sediment cores taken around the continent shows traces of this long story. Layers deposited during warmer intervals contain remains of diverse invertebrates, some larger than their equivalents in younger layers. Shell fragments and burrows reveal that episodes of gigantism are not new, but have appeared more than once in Antarctica's past. Though the fossil record for soft-bodied animals is limited, the patterns visible in preserved shells, spines, and feeding traces suggest that size increases emerged whenever cold and stability aligned. There were also times when the giants disappeared. During the warmest interglacial periods, when ice retreated farther than usual and new species arrived from distant oceans, the balance shifted. Some of the large forms became rarer, others shrank. These changes did not erase the pattern entirely. Instead, they showed how closely Antarctic gigantism is tied to the presence of sustained cold and long-term isolation. Among the species that continue to carry this history are animals that seem simple at first glance. Some starfish and sea urchins that live around Antarctica today have ancestors that survived glacial cycles stretching back millions of years. Their bodies show signs of slow adaptation rather than rapid reinvention. In the deep shelf regions, where ice rarely reaches, certain lineages remained stable, while the shallower zones were repeatedly cleared and rebuilt. These deep refuges may have acted as anchors, preserving traits that later spread outward when conditions allowed. Even the shape of the seafloor tells part of the story. Marks left by glaciers show where ice once dragged across submerged ground, removing everything in its path. Above these scars, modern communities have returned only recently in geological time. Their current forms are young compared to those living in older, untouched habitats. In some areas, the giants are more common where stability has lasted longest, suggesting that size is not only a biological trait, but a reflection of time uninterrupted. The cycles of freezing and thawing did more than rearrange the landscape. They slowed the pace of evolution in some ways and intensified it in others. After each retreat of the ice, species spread into open spaces with little competition. New variations had room to establish themselves. Growth strategies that relied on patience became strengths rather than vulnerabilities. Over millions of years, these rhythms shaped bodies that could stretch, lengthen, and endure. Today's Antarctic giants are not sudden anomalies. They are the living descendants of organisms that pass through repeated trials of cold and quiet renewal. Their size is part of a long dialogue between life and the shifting climate of the southern world, a story written not only in the present, but in the deep layers of the ocean floor, where the memory of ancient seas still rests in silence. In the waters surrounding Antarctica, cold is not only a sensation, it is a physical force that changes the character of the ocean itself. When seawater cools, its structure shifts. The molecules draw closer together, leaving less space between them. This tightening makes cold water denser than warm water, and that simple change influences nearly every aspect of life beneath the ice. Dense water sinks. In most oceans, this sinking creates layers that constantly move and overturn as temperatures shift with the seasons. Near the equator, warm surface water remains light, forming a barrier that separates it from the cooler depths below. But in the Southern Ocean, the cold reaches from the surface downward. There is no warm layer to slow the mixing. Instead, dense water slides along the seafloor and spreads outward, forming some of the deepest and most widespread currents on Earth. This density creates stability. The water does not stratify into strong layers that trap heat or isolate nutrients. Instead, the ocean becomes a continuous column of cold, allowing oxygen to be carried through it with remarkable efficiency. When scientists lower measuring instruments into these waters, they find that the oxygen does not drop sharply with depth the way it does in warmer seas. The gas remains available across wide vertical ranges, supported by the physical properties of the water itself. For the creatures living here, this matters. Respiration is one of the most fundamental challenges of life. Every animal must move oxygen to its cells, whether through lungs, gills, or simple diffusion across tissues. In warm water, low density and reduced oxygen levels force organisms to work harder. Fish must pump water more rapidly across their gills. Invertebrates relying on diffusion often remain small because their bodies cannot carry enough oxygen inward. In the Antarctic, density eases that burden. Cold water holds more oxygen, and because it mixes more evenly, the supply does not fade quickly as depth increases. The movement of oxygen through the water is slower but steadier, and respiration becomes less of a limiting factor. Creatures do not need rapid circulation or complex exchange systems. Sea spiders can breathe through their limbs. Amphipods can support larger bodies without suffocating. Even soft-bodied worms can stretch across the seafloor with minimal strain. The density of cold water also affects buoyancy, the upward force that counteracts weight. In warm, less dense water, large animals must expend energy to stay suspended. Soft tissues sag, and unsupported structures collapse under their own weight. This is why many gelatinous creatures, such as jellyfish, are often small and short-lived in tropical regions. Their bodies simply cannot hold shape without assistance from water that supports them. In the Southern Ocean, the situation changes. Denser water provides stronger buoyant lift. A large, soft-bodied animal does not need to reinforce itself with heavy skeletons or thick armor. Instead, its tissues can remain light and flexible, held aloft by the surrounding water. Jellyfish can grow wider bells and longer tentacles without tearing. Delicate invertebrates can expand their bodies without risk of sinking like stones. The ocean becomes a supportive environment rather than a weight that drags them downward. Pressure adds another element. As depth increases, pressure rises. In many parts of the world, animals living under high pressure must develop strong structural adaptations to withstand it. The deep sea is filled with species that remain small or compact, their bodies built to resist crushing forces. But around Antarctica, the gradient between shallow and deeper waters is softened by the cold. The density reduces drastic changes in temperature and gas solubility. Soft-bodied animals can venture deeper than they could elsewhere without being overwhelmed by sudden shifts. This gentle pressure environment allows species to expand vertically through the water column. Amphipods that feed near the seafloor can travel upward during certain seasons without crossing dangerous thresholds. Jellyfish can drift through different layers without risking collapse. Creatures are not confined to narrow bands. They move through a range of depths more freely, and this mobility shapes how they grow and feed. The physics of cold water also slows the sinking of organic material. In warmer seas, particles drop quickly, disappearing into the depths before many organisms can use them. In the Antarctic, dense water slows this descent. Food drifts like snow, falling gently rather than rushing downward. Large animals with slow metabolisms benefit from this. They do not need to chase food constantly. They can collect what arrives over long periods, storing energy for future growth. When researchers compare Antarctic ecosystems with those in warmer oceans, the contrasts reveal how deeply physical forces shape biology. In tropical waters, low density, rapid stratification, and fast sinking rates favor quick swimmers and small, efficient bodies. In the Southern Ocean, the opposite combination emerges. Dense water, even mixing, and slow particle descent support creatures that take their time, grow larger, and maintain fragile forms. None of this acts alone. Oxygen, cold, isolation, and scarcity all play their roles, but the density of the water creates an unseen foundation. It supports the giants that drift and crawl through the Antarctic Sea, holding them in a quiet suspension that would be impossible elsewhere. In this way, the physics of cold becomes part of the living world. It shapes how bodies breathe, how they float, and how they survive in a place where the ocean itself seems built to carry life gently through time. In the still waters beneath Antarctic ice, there are shapes that move with such quiet ease that they seem almost weightless. Their bodies pulse in slow rhythms, widening and narrowing like gentle breaths. These are jellyfish, though the word hardly captures what they become in this frozen part of the world. Here, some grow to sizes that seem unreal, their tentacles stretching so far into the blue that they fade from sight before they reach their end. To understand why these jellyfish can extend delicate structures to such extraordinary lengths, we must first return to the nature of the water around them. The Southern Ocean is calm beneath its frozen ceiling. Waves break far above, but their force does not reach the sheltered layers below. There are no violent storms to tear soft tissues apart, no sudden currents to twist long filaments into knots. The water moves slowly, like a great body breathing in its sleep. In this quiet, anything fragile has the chance to endure. A jellyfish is mostly water itself, held together by thin tissues that would collapse under harsher conditions. In tropical seas, where waves crash and currents twist unpredictably, jellyfish tend to remain smaller. Their tentacles must be short enough to survive turbulence. If they grow too long, they are torn, folded, or carried away. Even large tropical species, such as the lion's mane, live in places where motion is constant and survival depends on balancing size with the strength of the sea. In Antarctica, that balance shifts. The stillness beneath the ice allows tentacles to lengthen without damage. Like threads drifting in slow suspension, they stretch outward over time, adding length through quiet growth rather than sudden extension. Because the water does not slam or spin them, the tentacles remain intact, drifting behind the bell in long, graceful trails. These tentacles are more than decoration. They are feeding tools, extending the reach of the jellyfish into a wider circle of ocean. In warm waters, jellyfish often hunt in fast-moving environments where prey must be captured quickly. Their tentacles are shorter and their stings more concentrated, designed for sudden encounters. But in the Antarctic, life moves at a slower pace. Small organisms drift through the water like snowflakes that never melt. Instead of chasing food, the jellyfish wait. Long tentacles become an advantage in this setting. They increase the surface area available for catching tiny animals that float past in the calm water. The tentacles can stretch across large volumes of space, forming a nearly invisible curtain. When zooplankton or small crustaceans touch them, the stinging cells activate, and the prey is guided gently toward the jellyfish's mouth. Because food arrives slowly and sporadically, these animals do not need to feed constantly. They simply need to intercept enough drifting organisms to support their quiet metabolism. The nutrient cycles in Antarctic waters also play a role. During the short summer, when phytoplankton bloom in great abundance, the water becomes rich with life. Small animals multiply, feeding on the microscopic plants. As these grazers spread through the water column, they move past the waiting tentacles of the jellyfish. Long filaments increase the likelihood of contact without requiring the jellyfish to expend energy chasing prey. In slow ecosystems, efficiency matters more than speed. Comparing these polar species to jellyfish in warmer parts of the world highlights the influence of environment on shape. Tropical jellyfish often grow broader bells, which help them pulse through water that is constantly in motion. Their tentacles, while sometimes numerous, are usually shorter and more compact. Many live in coastal waters where currents shift rapidly with tides, storms, and river inputs. A fragile structure would not last long there. Their bodies reflect a world driven by movement and change. Antarctic jellyfish reflect something different. Their long tentacles mirror the patience of the water around them. They do not need strength to resist turbulence, only enough stability to remain suspended. With lower temperatures slowing their metabolism, they can afford to spread their feeding structures over great distances. Growth is gradual, measured in years rather than months. Nothing forces them to hurry. Scientists studying these animals sometimes describe their tentacles as living extensions of the environment itself. The filaments drift in the same rhythm as the water, responding to movements too subtle for the human eye. They are so thin that light passes through them, making them appear almost unreal. In some species, a single tentacle can stretch farther than the length of a room, tracing a pale line through the blue. Yet even with such remarkable dimensions, these jellyfish remain vulnerable. Their bodies depend on the stability that the Antarctic has provided for millions of years. If the water warms or currents strengthen, the conditions that allow these forms to exist may begin to change. Long tentacles that once drifted safely could become liabilities. For now, they remain part of a world shaped by calm and cold. Their presence offers a reminder that size in nature is not always driven by competition or strength. Sometimes it is shaped by quietness, by patience, and by the gentle physics of a place where nothing rushes. Beneath the ice, jellyfish move like slow constellations, their tentacles tracing paths through a silent ocean that holds them lightly, allowing them to grow longer than the imagination expects. In the cold waters surrounding Antarctica, time behaves differently. The seasons already stretch into long divisions of light and darkness, but beneath the surface, the difference becomes even more profound. Many of the creatures that live here do not measure their lives in months or short years. Instead, they carry time within their bodies, moving through the world with a patience that seems almost impossible. Longevity is one of the quiet foundations of Antarctic life. While many invertebrates in warmer seas grow quickly and die young, their relatives in the southern ocean follow a slower path. The cold that slows metabolism does not only change how they grow, it changes how long they remain on Earth. Some species continue living for decades, their bodies aging so gradually that a single lifetime can span the rise and fall of entire generations elsewhere. Scientists studying these waters have discovered sea stars that may live for half a century or more. Their arms thicken slowly, over time, adding new layers only when resources allow. Instead of racing toward maturity, they grow in quiet increments, sometimes taking years to reach the size that similar species achieve in a fraction of the time in warmer regions. Their movements remain unhurried, but their persistence reveals the hidden timeline of these cold ecosystems. There are Antarctic sponges that may be even older. Some are believed to have lifespans stretching beyond 100 years, their bodies expanding so gradually that growth becomes almost invisible. These sponges attach themselves to rocks on the seafloor and filter water at a pace that matches the stillness around them. Each year adds only a thin layer of new material, yet the accumulation across decades results in structures that seem ancient and enduring. Clams and other bivalves in the region also show remarkable longevity. Some species bury themselves in sediment and remain there for much of their lives, opening and closing with the rhythm of food availability. Their shells record their years, like trees record rings, marking slow lines that testify to a life spent surviving long Antarctic winters. In other parts of the world, similar species may live only a handful of years. Here, the same biology unfolds across a far longer span. Even tiny invertebrates that seem fragile hold on to time with surprising strength. Certain amphipods, though small compared to the giants that share their waters, can live for 10 or 20 years. Their relatives in warmer seas may complete their entire life cycle in a single year. The contrast is not only striking, it reveals how deeply the cold shapes every aspect of survival. Longevity supports gigantism in ways that are easy to overlook. A creature that grows slowly needs time to reach a large size. In places where life is short, that time is not available. A fast metabolism demands quick development, and bodies remain small because there is no chance to accumulate mass across many. In Antarctica, the slow pace reverses that pattern. Growth becomes a gradual layering, where each year adds only a small amount, but nothing interrupts the process. Instead of rapid competition, survival depends on endurance. A sea spider can continue expanding its limbs over many winters, taking advantage of the conditions that allow diffusion-based breathing to remain efficient. A Nemertean worm can add length as the years pass, curling across the seafloor without rushing to complete its form. Even jellyfish, which elsewhere may live brief and fragile lives, can persist far longer in these waters, returning each summer to feed and drifting through winter with minimal energy use. The stability of the Southern Ocean reinforces this pattern. Because the temperature remains cold and consistent, organisms do not face sudden shifts that shorten their lives. In warmer regions, heat waves, storms, and fluctuating currents can end lifespans prematurely. Around Antarctica, change arrives slowly. The environment allows survival rather than demanding constant adaptation. In this steadiness, bodies have time to age naturally rather than abruptly. Long lives also affect reproduction. Some Antarctic species do not release offspring every year. They may wait several seasons, storing energy until conditions support the survival of young. This strategy reflects the same patience seen in their growth. Instead of producing many young quickly, they invest in fewer offspring over long intervals. The approach works because the adults themselves remain living for extended periods. The passing of generations is not rushed. What emerges from this slow timeline is a world where age is not a rarity. It is part of the structure of the ecosystem itself. The animals that seem oversized are also, in many cases, long-lived. Their size is not a sudden achievement, it is a quiet accumulation made possible by time unfolding gently around them. To observe these creatures is to witness the way life can stretch when it is not hurried. Their bodies carry years the way the ice carries seasons, without visible urgency. In the stillness of the Antarctic, survival is not a matter of speed, it is a matter of lasting. And in lasting, these animals grow not only large, but old, becoming living records of a world where the rhythm of time is softened by the cold. Far below the surface of the Southern Ocean, there are places where even the long Antarctic twilight does not reach. These are the deep shelves and basins that surround the continent, hidden beneath water so cold and so dense that it moves with the weight of a slow dream. While much of the attention in these waters falls on the shallow zones beneath the ice, another world exists farther down, where light fades into silence and the shapes of life change in ways that do not appear anywhere else on Earth. Antarctica is unlike most continents in one simple and surprising way. The ocean floor around it does not drop suddenly into deep trenches. Instead, large stretches of the seafloor remain at relatively shallow depth, though still far below the reach of sunlight. These underwater shelves can extend for hundreds of miles, forming broad platforms sculpted over millions of years by advancing and retreating glaciers. When ice sheets pushed outward during ancient glaciations, they carved and scraped the seabed, leaving behind wide terraces and deep troughs that later filled with cold water when the climate warmed again. Today, these submerged landscapes are among the coldest and most stable habitats in the ocean. Temperatures remain close to freezing throughout the year, barely shifting from season to season. The water is heavy with oxygen and moves slowly across the shelf, carried by dense currents that glide like unseen rivers. Unlike the upper layers near the ice ceiling, where faint light still filters through, the deep shelf rests in near darkness, illuminated only by the dim glow of drifting particles. Life here is different from the world above. Without sunlight to guide the rhythm of the day, the creatures that inhabit these depths live according to the movement of the water and the gentle fall of organic matter from far above. Food arrives slowly, drifting down in small fragments known to scientists as marine snow. Tiny flakes of broken plankton, bits of algae, and the remains of microscopic animals settle across the seafloor like a quiet rain. This slow and steady nourishment supports an ecosystem that does not depend on abundance, but on constancy. Many of the giants of Antarctica find refuge in these deep shelves. Here, they are protected from the turbulence of surface storms and the shifting of sea ice. Delicate bodies that might not withstand stronger waters can stretch and expand without disturbance. Amphipods that appear large even in shallower regions become even more impressive at depth, their bodies growing thicker and longer across lifetimes that may span many years. Sea cucumbers, often small in other parts of the world, reach surprising sizes here, their bodies trailing across the sediment like pale footprints left in the quiet. Some species that inhabit these depths are rarely seen even by researchers. Cameras lowered into the cold reveal slow-moving starfish with arms that curve across the seafloor like drawn lines. Soft corals extend their polyps into the still water, feeding with patience rather than urgency. Sponges rise like frozen towers, their forms shaped not by rapid growth, but by centuries of gentle accumulation. These animals are not dramatic in appearance. Their presence is subtle, yet their size and longevity tell a story of uninterrupted conditions stretching back further than human memory. Near darkness plays a role in shaping these bodies. Without the need for sight, many creatures rely on touch or chemical cues carried through the water. Eyes may shrink or disappear entirely. Energy is saved rather than spent on unnecessary organs. In this world, where efficiency is essential, growth becomes possible only because nothing forces it to stop. The absence of sudden change allows evolution to explore unusual scaling, producing animals that seem oversized not through rapid development, but through long term persistence. The stability of the deep shelf is one of its most defining features. In shallower waters, temperature, light, and food availability shift across the year with dramatic contrast. Under the ice, the rhythms are slower but still noticeable. In the deep shelf, those rhythms soften even further. The environment remains nearly unchanged, not just across seasons, but across centuries. Geological evidence suggests that some basins have remained cold and undisturbed since ancient ice ages came and went. This constancy creates a kind of evolutionary shelter, allowing traits to endure that would vanish quickly in more dynamic habitats. Strange scaling patterns emerge in such stability. Soft-bodied animals that remain small elsewhere can increase in size without the internal strain that warm water imposes. Their tissues do not collapse because the dense, cold water supports them. They do not overheat because their metabolism moves slowly. They do not face constant predation because many fast-moving predators cannot survive here. Size becomes not a risk, but an option. Deep shelves also act as refuges during times of environmental change. When glaciation reshaped the Antarctic repeatedly, many shallow habitats were destroyed, scraped clean by ice that advanced like a slow blade. Species that lived deeper survived in the protected basins. When the ice retreated, they expanded outward again, repopulating younger ecosystems. The giants seen today may carry the ancient signatures of those survivors, shaped not only by the present, but by the deep cycles of Earth's past. In this hidden landscape, the Antarctic shows yet another side of its quiet power. Not all giants live where light reaches. Some grow where the sea remains almost still, where darkness does not threaten life but shields it, and where time moves with such steadiness that bodies are allowed to become what they could never be elsewhere. Far beneath the surface of the Southern Ocean, there are forces at work that cannot be seen in the movement of the water or in the quiet drift of the creatures that live there. They do not shimmer like light beneath the ice or rise like bubbles from the seafloor. Instead, they move through the ocean in tiny particles and dissolved minerals, shaping life in ways that unfold slowly but powerfully across the entire Antarctic world. Among the most important of these hidden influences is iron. Iron is a trace element, needed only in small amounts, yet without it, the ocean would be almost empty of life. Phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that form the base of the marine food web, require iron to carry out the chemical reactions that allow them to use sunlight. In many parts of the world, iron is scarce, even where there is plenty of light and nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. The lack of iron keeps phytoplankton growth small and limited. In the Southern Ocean, this delicate balance shifts. Antarctica's waters are richer in iron than most of the world's seas. The source of this iron does not come from rivers, since almost no liquid water flows across the frozen continent. Instead, the iron arrives through slower, deeper, and older pathways. When glaciers grind across ancient rock, they create fine sediments that enter the ocean as ice melts at the edges. Dust lifted from exposed land during dry, windy periods settles into the water. Even the seafloor contributes, releasing tiny amounts of iron from buried minerals when cold currents stir the sediments. Alone, these inputs would not be enough to support the massive bursts of life that appear each year. The secret lies in a process that brings deep water back toward the surface, a movement known to scientists as upwelling. In the Southern Ocean, cold and dense water sinks and travels great distances along the ocean floor. Eventually, it rises again near the continent, carrying with it nutrients that have accumulated in the darkness below. These nutrients include nitrogen and phosphorus from the breakdown of organic material, along with small but crucial amounts of iron. When this water reaches the sunlit layer near the surface, the effect is immediate. The combination of light and nutrients allows phytoplankton to multiply rapidly. These blooms can grow so large that they change the color of the water, creating faint swirls visible from space. The blooms form the foundation of Antarctic life, feeding krill and countless small organisms that, in turn, nourish larger animals. Yet, the strength of these blooms is not only due to nutrients rising from the deep. The coldness of the water slows the breakdown of organic matter, allowing nutrients to accumulate over long periods before they return to the surface. In warmer seas, decomposition happens quickly, and nutrients are often locked away in deeper layers where they cannot support plant growth. In the Southern Ocean, the pace is different. The slow cycles allow the ocean to store and release nutrients gradually, matching the rhythm of the seasons. Another factor makes the nutrient cycles unusually strong here. The Antarctic circumpolar current, the powerful ring of water that circles the continent, acts like a conveyor. It mixes waters from different depths and regions, spreading iron and other nutrients across vast distances. In many parts of the world, ocean currents are blocked or redirected by land masses. Around Antarctica, the water flows freely, creating one of the most efficient mixing systems on the planet. The presence of sea ice also plays a surprising role. During the long winter, ice expands across the surface, trapping algae and particles within its frozen layers. When spring arrives and the ice begins to melt, it releases these materials back into the water, providing an additional burst of nutrients. The meltwater forms a stable layer that keeps the surface calm and well lit, creating ideal conditions for phytoplankton to grow. It is as if the ice holds energy in storage and returns it when the world beneath is ready. These combined forces create a cycle unlike those in other oceans. There is a sudden abundance followed by long stillness, but the abundance is intense enough to carry life through the lean months. The strength of these blooms supports not only the giants that feed indirectly on the phytoplankton, but also the animals that feed on those giants. In this way, a tiny mineral becomes part of one of the most dramatic food webs on Earth. Comparing the Southern Ocean to warmer regions highlights how unusual this system is. In tropical waters, iron is often washed into the sea by rivers, but rapid stratification prevents it from reaching deeper layers. Blooms are smaller and more frequent, and food webs depend on constant sunlight rather than short, intense pulses of productivity. In temperate regions, seasonal changes create cycles of growth and decline, but the postivation, nutrients are not stored and released on the same scale. Only around Antarctica does the combination of cold, mixing, and iron create such powerful and brief explosions of life. The result is an ocean where size and survival are linked to the chemistry of the water itself. The abundance of nutrients allows small organisms to thrive for short periods, and the long intervals of scarcity reward species that can grow slowly and endure. Iron may be invisible, dissolved and drifting through the sea, but it is part of the quiet architecture that shapes the giants of the Antarctic, supporting them not through constant supply, but through the patient rhythm of the deep. Not every creature in Antarctica grows large. For all the giants that drift, crawl, or stretch across the seafloor, there are others that remain small, holding on to sizes that match their relatives in warmer oceans. Their presence offers a quiet reminder that gigantism is not a rule, but a possibility, one shaped by conditions that do not favor all species equally. In the shallow waters beneath the ice, some amphipods remain no larger than a grain of rice. They live in crevices between stones and cling to mats of algae that form along the seafloor. Unlike their oversized cousins, These small amphipods do not expand as the years pass. Their bodies stay compact and their lifespans remain shorter. They do not take advantage of the abundant oxygen or the long periods of stability in the same way other species do. Instead, they persist within the narrow shelter of their microhabitats, where size would become a burden rather than an advantage. There are also tiny snails that graze across the surface of rocks, scraping fine films of bacteria with their delicate mouthparts. Their shells are thin and fragile, built to conserve energy rather than withstand pressure. Growing larger would demand more resources than their environment can reliably offer. These snails live in areas where food arrives in thin layers, too scarce to support the slow accumulation of mass. The strategy that works for jellyfish and sea spiders does not apply to them. Their world is measured not in distance, but in surface. Even among sea spiders, where many species have become impressively large, some remain the size of a fingernail. These smaller forms occupy habitats where currents move more quickly, or where ice scouring disrupts the seafloor. A long leg span would not survive in such environments. Instead, compact bodies allow them to remain sheltered, gripping tight surfaces that protect them from disturbance. For them, gigantism would create exposure, placing them at risk rather than offering benefit. The same pattern appears in certain worms that burrow into the sediment. In deeper waters, large Nemertean worms stretch across the seafloor in long ribbons, but in disturbed or shifting areas, smaller species dominate. They live in narrow tunnels and retreat quickly when threatened. Their bodies are adapted for flexibility rather than size, allowing them to survive in sediments that are frequently overturned by ice or strong currents. If they grew longer, they would lose the ability to disappear into the safety of the seafloor. These outliers reveal something important. Gigantism in Antarctica is not automatic. It emerges only when the environment supports it across long periods of time. Stable temperatures, high oxygen, calm waters, and low predation create the foundation. Remove any one of these conditions, and the potential for large size fades. Small species show where the limits lie. Some of these limits are shaped by energy, a creature that cannot store enough food during the brief summer bloom cannot sustain growth through the long winter. Small bodies require less energy, and in places where resources are unpredictable, remaining small becomes the safer path. Growth is not only a possibility, it is a risk. If a species expands beyond what its habitat can support, it may not survive the lean months that follow. Other limits are shaped by space. In narrow crevices, under shifting ice, or in rapidly changing currents, a large form becomes impractical. Smallness offers shelter. It allows animals to hide from disturbance and move easily through complex surfaces. In these environments, size becomes a disadvantage, slowing escape and increasing exposure. There are also evolutionary trade-offs that shape these patterns. A species cannot maximize every advantage at once. Slow growth and long lifespans support gigantism, but they delay reproduction. If a habitat changes frequently, a species that reproduces quickly and remains small may fare better. In contrast, animals that invest heavily in size may struggle if stability is interrupted. The environment decides which strategy succeeds. Comparisons with other parts of the world highlight these lessons. In tropical reefs, where predation is high and disturbance is constant, small species dominate because they can reproduce rapidly and hide easily. In deep oceans, where stability resembles the Antarctic, some species grow large, while others remain tiny because they occupy microhabitats that favor compact forms. Across these systems, size reflects not only opportunity, but constraint. In Antarctica, the species that stay small offer a window into the edges of possibility. They show where the rules of gigantism begin to break down. They reveal the fine balance between environment and biology, where a slight change in temperature, oxygen, or food can tip the scale. Their presence reminds us that evolution is not driven by linear progress toward larger bodies, but by paths chosen in response to specific pressures. For now, these small creatures continue to live quietly among the giants. They move through the hidden spaces of the seafloor, surviving not through size, but through simplicity. Their lives unfold at the same slow pace as the world around them, yet their bodies tell a different part of the Antarctic story, one where staying small is not a failure, but a form of success shaped by the limits of place and the patience of time. At the opposite end of the world, another frozen ocean waits beneath long seasons of darkness and light. The Arctic may seem like Antarctica's mirror, a place shaped by cold and ice, distant from the rest of the planet. Yet when scientists study the creatures that live there, the pattern looks very different. The giants that are common in the Southern Ocean rarely appear in the northern one. The poles share a climate of extremes, but the lives within them tell two separate stories. The most striking difference lies in the structure of the land and sea. Antarctica is a continent surrounded by ocean. The Arctic is an ocean surrounded by continents. That single contrast shapes everything that follows. In the north, the sea is framed by the edges of North America, Europe, and Asia. Rivers flow into it from many directions, carrying heat, sediments, and nutrients. Warm currents from the Atlantic slip into Arctic waters, softening the cold and creating a patchwork of temperatures that change more quickly than those around Antarctica. Where the Southern Ocean is isolated by the great circumpolar current that circles Antarctica without interruption, the Arctic does not have a similar boundary. Water from other oceans can enter and mix more easily. With this mixing comes movement, and with movement comes change. The Arctic does not remain cold in the same stable way. Temperatures shift from season to season and from location to location, creating an environment where life must respond more quickly. These changing conditions influence who can survive there. Fast predators, which are rare in Antarctica's shallow waters, are more common in the Arctic. Fish such as cod and char move through coastal regions with greater speed than anything typically found in the Southern Ocean's sheltered shallows. Seals and whales migrate in and out over the year, following food rather than remaining in place. Even seabirds dive through the upper layers in search of prey, with so many hunters arriving and departing. Small animals cannot rely on a quiet life. Remaining small becomes a strategy of survival rather than a consequence of limitation. The ice itself also differs between the poles. Much of the Arctic sea ice is seasonal. It forms in winter and melts widely in summer, exposing large areas of open water for months at a time. This seasonal cycle allows winds and storms to stir the surface, breaking apart fragile structures. Under these conditions, delicate bodies have little chance to stretch and grow. Antarctica, in contrast, holds vast regions of ice that persist through the year, creating calmer waters beneath the frozen surface. Temperature plays another role. The Arctic may be bitterly cold in winter, but its average yearly temperatures are generally higher than those in the Southern Ocean. Summer brings periods of melt and warming that interrupt the stillness. These fluctuations speed up metabolism and shorten the periods when growth can proceed without interruption. Antarctic animals benefit from constancy. Arctic animals must prepare for variation. Nutrient patterns differ as well. The Arctic receives large pulses of nutrients from rivers and melting permafrost. These sources fuel bursts of productivity, but they do not match the deep upwelling that feeds the Southern Ocean from below. In Antarctica, nutrients rise from the depths through powerful mixing that repeats year after year. This long, slow recycling supports a reliable foundation for growth. In the Arctic, the timing and distribution of nutrients vary more dramatically, creating shorter windows where life can expand. These contrasts help explain why gigantism thrives in one pole and fades in the other. The creatures that grow large in Antarctica rely on low predation, stable, cold, high oxygen, and calm waters. When any of these ingredients weakens, the potential for extreme size disappears. The Arctic lacks several of these conditions at once. It has more predators that move with speed. It has more variable temperatures that shift across seasons. Its waters are influenced by surrounding lands, preventing the long-term isolation that characterizes the Southern Ocean. Yet the comparison reveals something deeper. Gigantism is not simply a response to cold. If temperature alone created large bodies, the Arctic would mirror the Antarctic. Instead, gigantism appears when multiple forces align. Cold slows metabolism. Stability allows long lifespans. High oxygen makes large bodies possible. Calm water protects delicate forms. Reduced predation removes the pressure to stay small. In Antarctica, these elements combine. In the Arctic, they separate. There are exceptions, but they follow the same pattern. Some deep Arctic basins, where conditions remain steady and predators are scarce, show hints of larger invertebrates. These pockets resemble the Antarctic deep shelf more than the surrounding northern waters. They reveal that gigantism does not belong to a place, but to a set of circumstances. Looking at the two poles together teaches us that size in nature is not an accident. It is an outcome written by the environment over long stretches of time. Where the world moves quickly, life remains small. Where the world slows and holds its shape, bodies have time to grow. The Arctic and Antarctica share cold and ice, but their differences show that gigantism is not born from temperature alone. It is born from stillness, isolation, and patience, the quiet forces that have shaped the Southern Ocean into a world where small creatures are allowed to become something more. Far from the frozen edges of Antarctica, in places where no sunlight has ever reached, another world exists that seems strangely familiar. The deep sea, stretching across the darkest parts of the planet, holds creatures that have grown large in ways that echo the giants of the Southern Ocean. They live thousands of feet below the surface, in cold and silent water, yet their bodies tell a story that parallels the one unfolding beneath Antarctic ice. In these depths, giant isopods roam the seafloor with slow, deliberate movements. Their bodies resemble oversized pill bugs, armored in overlapping plates that protect them from the weight of the water above. Most of their relatives in shallow seas are tiny, barely noticed as they crawl across rocks or hide in sand. But in the deep ocean, some grow to lengths that seem unbelievable, large enough to fill a person's arms if lifted from the seafloor. These isopods drift through a world where food is scarce and time stretches without interruption. Giant amphipods also appear in these depths. They resemble the smaller forms that cling to algae or drift among icy Antarctic waters, but here they reach sizes many times larger. Their translucent bodies look almost ghost-like in the faint glow of submersible lights. They move with gentle pulses of their limbs, not hurried or efficient, but steady. Like the Antarctic giants, they do not need speed to survive. The world around them remains quiet, and patience becomes one of their greatest strengths. The similarities between deep-sea gigantism and polar gigantism are not a coincidence. The environments share conditions that shape life in parallel ways, even though they are separated by vast distances and different histories. The deep sea is cold, just as the waters surrounding Antarctica are cold. Temperatures remain near freezing year-round, slowing metabolism and reducing the need for rapid energy use. In both places, Creatures that grow slowly can survive for long periods, taking advantage of rare opportunities to feed and turning small gains into gradual expansion. Oxygen also plays an important role, although the deep sea does not hold as much oxygen as the surface waters of the Southern Ocean. The cold temperatures allow the oxygen that is present to dissolve more effectively. This creates an environment where slow breathing and simple respiratory systems can support larger bodies than would be possible in warmer waters. Just as Antarctic sea spiders can rely on diffusion through their limbs, deep sea animals can rely on the efficiency of cold water to keep their tissues supplied without needing complex circulatory structures. Low predation is another shared pressure. In the deep sea, fast and mobile predators are rare. Most animals move slowly, conserving energy because food is unpredictable. Large bodies do not attract attention in the same way they might in a coral reef or coastal ecosystem. Instead, size becomes protective, allowing animals to store energy and endure long periods without feeding. In Antarctica, reduced predation near the seafloor has allowed invertebrates to explore larger body forms without constant risk. In the deep sea, the same freedom exists for different reasons, yet the outcome is strikingly similar. There is also a calmness that shapes both environments. The deep ocean does not experience storms or turbulent waves. Water moves like a slow current through vast, dark spaces. Delicate structures can survive without being torn apart. In Antarctica, the ice ceiling creates a sheltered world where fragile bodies can extend and grow. In the deep sea, pressure replaces ice as the stabilizing force. Movements are so gentle and sustained that large forms remain intact for decades. But despite these similarities, the origins of gigantism in the deep sea follow a different path. Many deep sea animals evolved large bodies not only because of cold and low predation, but because they must travel long distances in search of food. Carcasses that sink from the surface provide brief but rich sources of nourishment. Larger bodies allow animals to store energy from these rare events, helping them survive until the next scarce meal arrives. In the Southern Ocean, abundance arrives seasonally, fueled by sunlight and nutrients. In the deep sea, abundance arrives unpredictably, delivered from above in silence. The comparison between these two worlds reveals something important about the nature of evolution. When life faces similar pressures, it can arrive at similar solutions even in places that never intersect. This is convergent gigantism, where size emerges not from shared ancestry, but from shared demands. The giants of the deep sea and the giants of Antarctica are not related in any close sense. They did not inherit their size from the same source. Instead, they grew large because their environments allowed and encouraged it. Both worlds remind us that size is not simply a matter of biology. It is shaped by cold, stability, and the long patience of time. In the deep sea, animals live in darkness that has never changed. Beneath Antarctic ice, animals live in light that fades into extended twilight. Yet in both places, the rhythm is slow. Growth does not rush. Life expands not because it must dominate, but because it has room to unfold. In these parallel environments, far apart but united by quiet forces, nature shows that the same patterns can emerge wherever the world moves gently enough for them to take shape. In the cold waters surrounding Antarctica, size is not simply an outcome of chance. It is a form of survival shaped by the quiet demands of the environment. The giants of this region did not become large only because conditions allowed it. Their bodies use size as a tool, a way to endure in a world where resources arrive briefly, temperatures press constantly toward freezing, and life unfolds at a slow and measured pace. For many animals here, One of the greatest challenges is the long stretch of scarcity that follows the short burst of summer abundance. Food appears in great quantities for only a small part of the year. When the sunlight fades and winter returns, the sea becomes a place where very little is produced. Smaller animals living in warmer seas can feed continually and replace energy often. In Antarctica, that option does not exist. Large bodies offer a way to bridge this divide. A creature that stores resources within its tissues can survive long periods without feeding. Thick layers of muscle or gelatinous flesh act as living reserves, holding fats and other energy-rich materials that can be used slowly across the winter months. Some giant amphipods build these reserves during the summer bloom, expanding their bodies gradually as food becomes available. Instead of depending on constant grazing, they rely on what they have saved, the way a traveler might prepare for a long and quiet journey. This ability to store energy is not limited to invertebrates with dense bodies. Even soft forms benefit from size. Many Antarctic jellyfish have bells filled with tissue that can hold nutrients, allowing them to drift through months when prey becomes scarce. Their slow movements match the pace of their energy use. Nothing is wasted. In a world where patience is essential, larger bodies create room for endurance. Size also helps animals manage temperature. Cold water draws heat away quickly, threatening to slow bodily functions beyond their limits. Small creatures with thin bodies lose heat faster and must compensate by increasing their metabolism. This is difficult in waters where food is unpredictable. Larger animals experience temperature differently. Their greater volume compared to surface area slows the exchange of heat with the surrounding water. A large body cools more slowly than a small one, creating a kind of internal buffering. This does not mean warmth in the way humans understand it. Instead, it means stability. Chemical reactions inside cells proceed at a steadier pace. Growth can continue gradually, rather than stopping abruptly. Even when the surrounding water remains near freezing, the processes of life move forward in gentle steps. In species such as sea spiders, extending the limbs increases the internal space where oxygen and nutrients circulate, helping them maintain function despite the cold. The ability to buffer against temperature becomes especially important during sudden shifts. When ice forms or melts, the immediate environment can change rapidly. Larger bodies handle these changes more easily than smaller ones. They absorb variation rather than being overwhelmed by it. Over evolutionary time, this stability becomes an advantage, allowing species to survive conditions that might eliminate those with fragile or limited forms. Size also influences reproduction. In many colder ecosystems, large animals produce more offspring than small ones because they can store more energy and release young less frequently, but in greater numbers. Some Antarctic species do not reproduce every year. Instead, they wait until they have built enough reserves to support development. Their reproductive cycles are slow and deliberate, matching the pace of the world around them. Eggs laid by larger animals are often bigger and richer in nutrients. This gives the young a better chance of surviving the long and difficult early stages of life. In waters where food may be unavailable for months at a time, starting life with a reserve already in place can mean the difference between growth and loss. In some sea stars and other invertebrates, larger adult size allows for the release of many more eggs when conditions finally become favorable. For species that brood their young rather than releasing them into the open water, larger bodies provide physical space to protect developing offspring. Certain amphipods carry their young inside specialized pouches, shielding them from predators and harsh conditions until they are ready to survive on their own. A larger parent can shelter more young and invest more energy in each one, increasing the likelihood that they will reach maturity. Even in creatures that do not care for their young directly, size influences survival through time. Long-lived animals have more chances to reproduce across their lives. A species that grows slowly and lives for decades can recover from years when conditions are poor. Smaller, shorter lived species must succeed quickly or disappear. In Antarctica, where unpredictability is woven into the rhythm of the year, longevity becomes a quiet safeguard. Taken together, these advantages reveal that gigantism is more than a striking feature of the Southern Ocean. It is a strategy shaped by the cold, by scarcity, and by the long patience of a place where life endures through waiting as much as through growth. Large bodies store what the world provides, protect against what it withholds, and carry the future through seasons when the sea rests in silence. Deep beneath the quiet movements of Antarctic life, there is another story unfolding, one that cannot be seen with the eyes alone. It exists not in the shape of a limb or the length of a tentacle, but in the microscopic instructions that guide every cell. The giants of these cold waters did not only grow large because the environment allowed it. Their bodies carry genetic traces of a long journey, written slowly across millions of years. When scientists study the DNA of Antarctic species, they find patterns that are different from those seen in warmer parts of the world. These differences are not loud or dramatic. They are subtle changes that allow life to function in a place where temperatures stay near freezing and where the rhythm of survival moves at a pace that matches the slow drift of the currents. One of the most striking discoveries involves cold-adapted genes. In many Antarctic invertebrates, certain proteins are shaped in ways that keep them flexible at low temperatures. Most proteins in animals begin to lose their structure when exposed to intense cold, becoming stiff or unable to carry out their usual work. But in the Southern Ocean, cells have found quiet solutions. Their proteins move more gently, bending without breaking, allowing chemical reactions to continue even when the surrounding water could freeze the surface of a ship. These adaptations are especially visible in the enzymes that manage metabolism. In warmer seas, enzymes work quickly, speeding through reactions that support fast growth and high energy use. In Antarctic species, the same enzymes are tuned differently. They act slowly, but they remain reliable. They do not collapse when the water becomes colder. Instead, they move with the same patience that shapes the lives of the animals themselves. Cold-adapted genes also influence the structure of cell membranes. In most organisms, membranes become rigid in freezing conditions, trapping nutrients and slowing the flow of life inside the Antarctic species. Avoid this problem through small genetic adjustments that change the balance of fats within their membranes. The cells stay soft and fluid, even in temperatures that would harden most tissues. This flexibility allows oxygen, nutrients, and signals to pass through without obstruction, supporting bodies that grow larger than expected in such a cold environment. But the DNA of Antarctic giants does not only tell a story about adaptation, it also reveals something about time. Many species in the Southern Ocean show unusually slow mutation rates. Mutations are the small genetic changes that accumulate across generations. In most animals, they appear regularly as DNA is copied and passed forward. But in the deep cold of Antarctica, these changes arrive less often. The reasons are still being studied, but scientists believe that slower metabolism and long lifespans play a part. When cells divide less frequently, there are fewer chances for mistakes to occur. This slow rate of genetic change creates a kind of stability. Species evolve along long pathways rather than short, branching bursts of rapid transformation. Their lineages stretch back through ancient climates, surviving cycles of ice and open water without needing to reinvent themselves quickly. Evolution in this part of the world is less like a race and more like a long walk taken over many generations. These long evolutionary pathways can be seen in the relationships between Antarctic species and their distant relatives. Some sea spiders have genetic lineages that trace back tens of millions of years, showing only gradual shifts over time. Their bodies may look strange to modern eyes, but they carry echoes of ancient designs that survived because the environment around them did not change suddenly. Sponges found on the deep shelves also tell this silent history. Their DNA reveals patterns of slow divergence, suggesting that populations remained isolated in different basins for long stretches before reconnecting when ice retreated. Instead of being shaped by rapid competition, they were shaped by endurance, holding their place in a world that favored patience. Even amphipods, which vary widely in size across Antarctica, show genetic signs of these long pathways. Large forms and small forms share many similarities deep within their DNA. The differences that allow some to grow many times larger arose not through sudden leaps, but through tiny steps taken across countless generations. This slow unfolding helps explain why gigantism is not universal. The environment may provide the possibility, but evolution moves only as fast as time allows. There is another lesson hidden in these genetic clues. When life evolves slowly, it becomes finely tuned to the conditions around it. The giants of Antarctica are not generalists that could thrive anywhere. They are specialists shaped by cold stability. Their genes reflect a world that remains steady long enough for such traits to deepen. This precision brings strength, but it also creates vulnerability. Rapid change challenges species that have spent millions of years adapting to predictability. Yet for now, the DNA of these creatures stands as a record of resilience. It shows that gigantism is not simply a reaction to cold or oxygen or calm water. It is a trait woven through time, carried forward by lineages that survived ice ages and long darkness. Their genomes are libraries of quiet adjustments, each one helping them remain in a place where life moves slowly and where size becomes not only a feature of the body, but a memory of the past. In this genetic stillness, the giants of Antarctica continue their long story, shaped as much by what lies within their cells as by the frozen world that surrounds them. Along the frozen edge of Antarctica, enormous walls of ice rise from the sea like pale cliffs. They look unchanging from a distance, as if they have always been there and always will be. But these ice shelves are not fixed in time. They are vast floating platforms, connected to the continent, yet resting on the ocean beneath. When they weaken and collapse, the change ripples quietly through the world below, reaching the hidden communities that depend on their shelter. For countless years, the underside of these shelves has created a rare kind of habitat. The sealing of ice blocks sunlight, softens waves, and keeps the water beneath calm even when storms rage far above. In this protected space, fragile creatures have flourished. Sea spiders drift slowly over the seafloor. Giant amphipods gather in still basins. Soft corals open their delicate bodies without fear of being torn apart. The stability has shaped their lives, allowing slow growth and unusual forms to endure across in generations. When an ice shelf collapses, the change is sudden compared to the long rhythm of the Antarctic environment. Even if it unfolds quietly, the ceiling disappears. Sunlight reaches places that have been dim for centuries. Waves begin to travel farther beneath the surface. Water that was once still becomes stirred by wind and motion. For species that have evolved in silence, the loss of this shelter is more than a shift in scenery. It is the loss of a world they were built to inhabit. Habitat loss arrives first. Many giant invertebrates live in the cold water directly beneath the shelves, where conditions remain stable year after year. When the ice breaks apart, these regions become exposed. Some areas experience rapid colonization by species from nearby open waters. Others change more slowly, but the difference is inevitable. Sediments that once held long lived sponges and sea stars can be overturned by increased movement. Organisms that depend on shelter may not be able to cling to the seafloor or remain anchored in shifting currents. For species that take decades to reach full size, these losses cannot be repaired quickly. A sponge that grows a tiny amount each year cannot rebuild a population within a short span of time. A sea spider that matures slowly cannot replace itself if young are lost before they survive their early stages. The collapse of a single ice shelf does not remove every habitat beneath it, but it fragments the continuity that allowed giants to persist. Predation also changes when ice shelves fall away. In the quiet waters beneath the ice, fast hunters are scarce. Many fish avoid these dark and cold spaces. When the ice disappears, predators that once remained outside can reach new territory. Certain fish species begin to move into areas that were previously inaccessible. Seals and penguins may hunt in newly open water. Even small shifts in predator presence can alter survival for invertebrates that have never needed to avoid sudden attack. Large, slow bodied animals are especially vulnerable. A giant amphipod that once spent its life feeding without disturbance may now share its environment with agile hunters that do not allow such calm. The introduction of new predators does not always lead to immediate decline, but it disrupts the conditions that supported unusual body sizes. When predation increases, the advantage of being large may fade. Smaller, faster, or more concealed forms may succeed instead. Shifts in oxygen and temperature add another layer of change. Ice shelves help maintain cold, stable water by blocking warm surface currents and reducing mixing. When the ice disappears, slightly warmer water can flow into the newly open areas. Even small increases in temperature can reduce the amount of oxygen the water can hold. For creatures that depend on high oxygen to support large bodies, this shift creates stress. A sea spider that breathes through its limbs cannot adjust quickly to lower oxygen availability. A giant worm with slow metabolism may find that its tissues no longer receive enough oxygen to maintain size. These changes do not always cause immediate mortality. Instead, they affect growth over time. Future generations may not reach the same size. Populations that once showed consistent gigantism may begin to shrink gradually, reflecting a new balance shaped by altered water chemistry. Temperature changes also affect reproduction. Many Antarctic species rely on narrow temperature ranges to time development. If water warms even slightly, embryos may develop too quickly or fail to survive the early stages. Species with long lifespans and slow reproduction cannot adapt rapidly. A single disrupted generation can echo forward for decades. Ice shelf collapse does not transform the ecosystem overnight, but it removes the stillness that shaped the giants of the Southern Ocean. The changes unfold quietly, layer by layer, as if the ocean itself is adjusting to a different rhythm. Some species may retreat into deeper, more stable waters. Others may persist, but with smaller bodies, and some may vanish from areas where they once thrived. In a place where life has been shaped by calm and consistency, the loss of ice is more than the melting of a structure. It is the unraveling of a foundation that has supported slow and extraordinary forms for longer than human memory. Across most of human history, the waters surrounding Antarctica have remained almost unchanged. For millions of years before that, temperatures shifted only slowly, allowing life in the Southern Ocean to follow its long and patient path. But now, the cold that once defined this world is beginning to soften. The change is not loud, yet it moves steadily through the water, altering the foundation that has supported giant creatures for ages. Scientists measuring the Southern Ocean over recent decades have noticed a gradual rise in temperature. The warming is small when described in numbers, often only fractions of a degree, but in a place where stability is everything, even the smallest increase holds weight. Cold water that once hovered just above the freezing point now holds slightly more heat. Currents that once moved dense, chilled water along the seafloor are becoming altered by subtle shifts in temperature. These changes do not reshape the ocean overnight. They unfold quietly, way a long winter might fade into spring without a clear beginning. As the water warms, one of its most important properties begins to change. Cold seawater can hold large amounts of dissolved oxygen. This is one of the reasons Antarctic giants have been able to grow the way they do. Their bodies depend on oxygen moving gently through tissues, supporting slow metabolisms and large forms without strain. When the temperature rises, the water cannot carry as much oxygen. The decrease may seem small at first, but living systems respond to it over time. Projections suggest that if warming continues, the amount of oxygen available in parts of the Southern Ocean will decline noticeably over the coming century. The loss will not be uniform. Shallow waters near melting ice shelves may experience the change more quickly, while deeper basins may retain their oxygen longer, but the trend points in a single direction. As oxygen decreases, the environment that once supported giant invertebrates may begin to favor smaller bodies instead. Species that rely on diffusion for breathing are among the most vulnerable. Sea spiders, which absorb oxygen through their limbs rather than using lungs or gills, depend heavily on high oxygen levels. Their bodies have grown large in part because the cold water allows oxygen to spread slowly and evenly. If that balance shifts, their ability to maintain size becomes strained. Larger individuals may survive for a time, but future generations could grow to smaller dimensions, reflecting the limits of the new environment. Giant amphipods face similar challenges. Their bodies require more oxygen than their tiny relatives elsewhere in the world. When the water cools and oxygen remains abundant, this demand can be met easily, even with simple respiratory structures. In warmer, less oxygen-rich water, large amphipods may begin to lose their advantage. Experiments have already shown that when temperatures increase and oxygen decreases, these animals become more sluggish and their survival declines. Smaller amphipods, with lower energy needs, may fare better. Soft-bodied species, such as large Nemertean worms, may also be at risk. Their long forms depend on slow but steady diffusion of oxygen along their tissues. If that flow weakens, the outer parts of the body may not receive enough oxygen to remain viable. Over time, natural selection may favor shorter or thinner individuals, reshaping the species toward forms that match the altered water chemistry. Even jellyfish, which often tolerate a range of conditions, are not immune. Large Antarctic jellyfish rely on slow growth and the ability to store energy across long seasons. If warming disrupts oxygen levels or alters prey distribution, their size may decrease. Smaller jellyfish would require less energy and less oxygen, making them more suited to the changing environment. Warming also brings indirect effects. As sea ice melts earlier in the year and forms later, the seasonal rhythms that support Antarctic life shift. Phytoplankton blooms may occur at different times. Krill and other grazers may not synchronize with the availability of food. Species that rely on long, predictable cycles could struggle to adjust. Large animals with slow reproduction cannot easily change their timing. If a single crucial step falls out of rhythm, the consequences may echo across decades. Some species may retreat into deeper or more stable waters where temperatures change more slowly. Others may attempt to adapt through gradual shifts in body size or behavior, but the giants of Antarctica evolved under conditions that remained steady for millions of years. Their strength comes from specialization, not flexibility. The warming of the Southern Ocean does not erase the world that created these giants, but it introduces new pressures that their ancestors never faced. The change is not dramatic in appearance. There are no sudden collapses or immediate disappearances in most regions. Instead, the transformation may be felt first in the bodies of the young, which grow less with each passing year. In a place where life has always unfolded slowly, the effects of warming will unfold slowly as well. The ocean will continue to hold its quiet beauty. Creatures will continue to drift, feed, and endure. Yet beneath the stillness, the balance that once favored large forms is shifting. The giants that have lived here for countless generations now face a future shaped by a new and unfamiliar warmth, carried not by sudden force, but by the gentle and steady rise of the water around them. In many parts of the world, the changes unfolding in the oceans are not marked by the disappearance of species, but by something quieter. Animals that once grew to familiar sizes are becoming smaller. Their bodies are thinning, shortening, or maturing earlier than before. These shifts are easy to overlook, yet they offer one of the clearest signals that the balance between temperature, oxygen, and life is changing. Scientists studying warming waters in regions far from Antarctica have already documented this pattern. In the North Atlantic, certain fish species now reach adulthood at smaller sizes than they did only a few decades ago. Their bodies grow more quickly in early life because warmer temperatures speed up metabolism. But faster growth requires more oxygen, and as the water warms, less oxygen is available. Instead of continuing to grow through later years, these fish stop sooner, reaching maturity while still small. Along tropical coastlines, mollusks and crustaceans have shown similar patterns. Shells that once measured greater lengths are now found in reduced forms. Some species of squid that once stretched impressively across open water are now shorter and lighter. These changes do not always bring immediate harm to the species, but they alter how individuals feed, reproduce, and survive. Even in freshwater environments, warming has led to smaller body sizes in insects that spend their early stages in streams and lakes. Their growth responds directly to the combined pressure of higher temperatures and lower oxygen availability. Although these environments differ from the Southern Ocean, the underlying principle remains the same. When oxygen becomes harder to access, large bodies become more difficult to maintain. These examples act as a window into what may happen in Antarctica. The giants of the Southern Ocean have not yet shown widespread declines in size, but subtle hints are beginning to appear. In a few regions where the water has warmed, slightly and seasonal ice forms later than before. Researchers have recorded amphipods that grow to shorter lengths than those found in colder and more stable areas. The difference is small, and the populations remain healthy, yet the change is significant because it reflects a shift in the limits the environment can support. Some long-lived sponges have also shown reduced growth rates in places where oxygen levels have begun to decrease. These organisms do not shrink, but their future size depends on how much they grow each year. When younger individuals add less to their bodies, the size distribution of the population gradually tilts towards smaller forms. Because these species live for many decades, such shifts may take a long time to become obvious, which makes early detection especially important. Sea spiders, however, present one of the most concerning early signals. In a handful of monitored sites, juveniles have shown lower survival rates during unusually warm years. Individuals that reach adulthood are still large, but fewer survive long enough to do so. If this pattern continues, the effect may not appear as shrinking adults, but as declining numbers of large individuals over time. Slow reproduction means that each generation carries more weight in the future of the population. To understand how these patterns might unfold in the coming decades, scientists use predictive models that combine temperature projections, oxygen changes, and species specific physiology. These models are not meant to forecast exact outcomes. Instead, they explore the boundaries within which life can persist. When researchers simulate conditions where the water warms by only a small amount, the results suggest that many Antarctic giants will continue to survive but may grow more slowly and reach reduced maximum sizes. In scenarios where warming continues beyond those small increases, the models show more dramatic effects. Species that rely on diffusion for breathing become particularly vulnerable. Their risk does not come from sudden loss, but from the narrowing of safe conditions. Juveniles struggle to reach adulthood at larger sizes. Adults may live shorter lives. Over time, populations shift toward forms that need less oxygen, which often means smaller bodies. These models also reveal something important. Shrinking is not simply a sign of decline, it is a response, a way for life to adjust when the environment places new limits on what is possible. But in Antarctica, where many species do not adapt quickly, shrinking may serve as one of the earliest warnings that stability is fading. Because these organisms grow slowly and depend on narrow environmental ranges, noticeable changes may arrive only after the shift has already taken root. For now, these signals remain scattered and subtle. Most giant species still thrive in the cold and oxygen-rich waters that have shaped them for millions of years. Yet, modern examples from other oceans act like reflections of a possible future. They show that size is not fixed. It responds to the world around it, expanding when conditions allow and receding when the balance begins to change. In the quiet waters of Antarctica, the first hints come not as dramatic loss, but as gentle reduction, a smaller shell, a shorter limb, a slower path to maturity. These changes speak softly, offering a glimpse of what shrinking species can teach us. If the world continues to warm, the giants that once defined these frozen seas may not disappear. They may simply become smaller, carrying within their bodies the record of a changing ocean, written not in sudden collapse, but in the steady narrowing of what the cold once allowed. In the past, much of what lived beneath the Antarctic ice remained only a guess. Divers could reach a few places, and ships could lower instruments into the dark, but most of the vast underwater world stayed hidden. The giants that moved slowly across the seafloor were known only through scattered glimpses, like distant shapes seen through fog. Today, that is beginning to change. New technology is allowing scientists to enter these quiet spaces without disturbing them, revealing lives that have continued in silence for millions of years. One of the most important advances comes in the form of underwater drones. These small, self-guided machines glide through the cold water with gentle movements, using cameras and sensors to explore regions that humans cannot safely reach. Unlike submarines of the past, they do not create loud noise or bright light that might frighten delicate animals. Instead, they move slowly, matching the pace of the environment around them. Some drones travel along the seafloor, tracing the contours of rocky shelves and soft sediment. Others drift through open water, recording the shapes of jellyfish as they pulse through the blue. These drones allow scientists to observe giant amphipods, sea spiders, and other invertebrates in their natural surroundings. Rather than collecting specimens and removing them from the environment, researchers can watch how they feed, rest, and interact with one another. In one region beneath a thick stretch of ice, a drone recorded a gathering of large amphipods circling slowly around a patch of decaying algae. their bodies moving in quiet rhythm. In another, it captured a sea spider lifting its long legs over the seafloor as if stepping carefully through a world made of glass. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, add another dimension to this exploration. While drones travel independently, ROVs are guided by scientists aboard ships far above. Through long cables, researchers control the movement of the machine in real time, steering it through narrow passages and across steep underwater slopes. The cameras on these vehicles send back high quality video, allowing scientists to see details that were once impossible to study without removing animals from their habitat. Some ROVs are equipped with gentle sampling tools that can collect small pieces of sediment or tiny organisms without harming them. This allows researchers to study the chemistry of the seafloor and the microscopic life that supports larger species. Because ROVs can remain underwater for long periods, they provide a window into daily and seasonal rhythms. In one study, an ROV observed a giant worm emerging slowly from its burrow and extending its body into the current, gathering food that drifted past like fine dust. Such moments were once only imagined. Now they are recorded with clarity. To reach even deeper and more inaccessible spaces, scientists have developed ice-piercing robots. These machines are designed to melt or drill narrow tunnels through thick ice, then lower themselves into the untouched water below. Once beneath the ice, they can travel horizontally for long distances, mapping areas that no diver or vehicle has ever seen. The technology is delicate, since the robot must return through the same opening it entered. But when successful, it reveals environments that have been sealed away for centuries. In some cases, these robots carry instruments that measure oxygen levels, temperature, and salinity with remarkable precision. This allows scientists to understand how conditions beneath the ice change over time and how those changes might affect the giants that live there. The robots can also place long-term sensors that remain in the water for months or years, quietly recording data while the ice closes again above them. High-resolution under-ice cameras add another layer to this new era of discovery. These small devices are lowered through drilled holes and suspended beneath the frozen surface. They remain still, recording without movement, allowing life to continue undisturbed. Over time, the cameras gather footage of creatures passing naturally through the frame. A jellyfish may drift slowly across the pale light. A sea star may climb over a sponge that took decades to grow. Sometimes nothing happens for hours, and then a single giant amphipod enters the scene, its legs moving with patient certainty. These stationary cameras offer something that moving vehicles cannot. They capture the quiet pace of Antarctic life as it truly unfolds. They show that many species do not move constantly. They rest, they wait, they respond to currents that change gradually rather than abruptly. By watching these recordings, scientists learn not only what species live in these waters, but how they exist in time. Together, these tools are transforming our understanding of the Southern Ocean. They do not replace the patience required to study such a slow world, but they extend the reach of human observation into places where eyes alone could never travel. What was once hidden is now seen with gentle clarity. Through these technologies, the giants of Antarctica are no longer distant mysteries. They are living beings, observed in the quiet spaces they have always called home, continuing their slow and ancient rhythms beneath the ice. In recent years, the quiet world beneath the Antarctic ice has begun to reveal itself in ways no one expected, not through loud discovery or dramatic expeditions, but through the steady patience of cameras left to watch what happens when no one is there at all. These cameras do not chase movement or search for rare events. They simply wait, and in that waiting, They have captured moments that reshape what scientists believed they understood about life in the Southern Ocean. Some of the first surprises came from footage of unusually large species that had never been seen so clearly in their natural habitat. One camera, placed beneath a thick stretch of sea ice, recorded a sea spider moving slowly across the seafloor. Its legs extended across the frame with an ease that made its size unmistakable. Scientists knew such giants existed, but seeing one glide beneath undisturbed water showed how confidently these animals move when the environment remains calm. Later recordings revealed amphipods that appeared almost unreal in their proportions. In one sequence, a large amphipod drifted into view beside a cluster of smaller individuals. The size difference was striking, and the footage confirmed that these giants do not live alone or as rare exceptions. They share space with smaller relatives, feeding in the same area without competition or aggression. Until this footage, scientists debated whether giant amphipods were solitary. Now it seems they are part of larger communities, moving among others as if their size is simply another shape the ocean allows. Cameras have also captured huge Nemertean worms emerging from their burrows with a grace that contrasts sharply with their length. In the past, researchers saw only preserved specimens. These recordings show the animals as they truly are, uncoiling with slow certainty, extending across the sediment like living ribbons. Their movements reveal that their size is not a burden, but a normal part of life in a world where time stretches as patiently as they do. Beyond documenting unusual size, the cameras have revealed behaviors never recorded before. One long-term camera stationed on a rocky shelf filmed a giant sea spider carrying what appeared to be clusters of eggs along its legs. Scientists had suspected that some species might brood their young, but the behavior had never been witnessed directly. The footage showed the adult turning slowly, adjusting its posture as if shielding the delicate spheres from the current. It was not dramatic, yet it changed what researchers understood about the early lives of these creatures. Another discovery came from a camera placed near a field of sponges. Over several weeks, it recorded a pattern no one expected. Giant amphipods visited the same location repeatedly, arriving in small groups at irregular intervals. They appeared to feed gently from the surface of the sponges without damaging them. Until this observation, scientists believed amphipods were mainly scavengers that fed only on dead material. The footage suggests a more complex relationship, perhaps involving shared resources rather than simple consumption. In one of the most surprising recordings, two large jellyfish drifted slowly through pale light, their tentacles trailing behind them for remarkable distances. As they passed one another, their tentacles brushed and then separated without entangling. This delicate interaction revealed that jellyfish may be more aware of their surroundings than previously believed, adjusting their movements to avoid contact in the stillness beneath the ice. Such behavior may explain how long tentacles survive in fragile environments without frequent damage. Some cameras have even documented interactions between giants that no one imagined occurred at all. In a quiet basin, a sea spider approached a resting amphipod. Instead of avoiding one another, they shared the same patch of sediment for several minutes. The amphipod shifted slightly, but did not flee. The sea spider continued on its path, stepping slowly across the seafloor. There was no conflict, no sign of threat, only two large creatures moving through the same space with calm acceptance. These moments suggest that gigantism in Antarctica does not arise from fierce competition, but from a world shaped by peace and stability. Other interactions have been more unexpected. One recording showed a giant worm stretching part of its body upward into the water column while several amphipods gathered below. It appeared as if the amphipods were feeding on particles released by the worm's movement. This may indicate a form of indirect connection between species, where one benefits from the behavior of another without harm. Such subtle relationships are difficult to detect through traditional sampling, but cameras reveal them naturally. Stillness has turned out to be the most valuable tool. Because the cameras remain motionless for long periods, animals behave as they normally would. They do not hide or retreat. They do not change their patterns to avoid disturbance. Instead, they pass through the frame as though the camera is simply another part of their environment. These recordings do more than show unusual creatures. They offer a glimpse into a world shaped not by sudden action, but by patience, calm water, and slow rhythms. Each moment captured beneath the ice becomes part of a larger understanding. The giants of Antarctica are not mysteries because they are rare. They are mysteries because they have lived their lives without witnesses. Now, through the quiet gaze of these cameras, their hidden world is coming gently into view. In the cold waters surrounding Antarctica, there are creatures whose bodies look as though time never touched them. Their shapes do not resemble the sleek forms of modern fish or the flexible outlines of fast predators. Instead, they seem carved from a different chapter of Earth's history, holding designs that first appeared long before humans existed, long before the continents reached their present places. Scientists sometimes call these species living fossils, not because they are unchanged copies of ancient life, but because their body plans have remained steady across ages that reshaped almost everything else on the planet. Some of the most striking examples are the Antarctic sponges that rise from the seafloor like slow-growing towers. Their forms are simple, with no eyes, no limbs, and no nervous system, yet they persist with a quiet confidence. Fossils of similar sponges appear in rocks from hundreds of millions of years ago, when early oceans were filled with unfamiliar life. The sponges living today are not identical to those ancient ones, but their basic structure remains recognizable. The ocean around Antarctica has been stable enough for long stretches of time that such simplicity continues to succeed. Sea spiders offer another window into deep time. Their bodies, with long legs surrounding a small central core, resemble creatures seen in early fossil deposits. While modern sea spiders have adapted to the cold and to the high oxygen of Antarctic waters, the overall design has changed only gradually across immense spans of history. Genetic studies suggest that some Antarctic lineages trace back to ancient ancestors that lived before the breakup of earlier supercontinents. These insects of the sea have survived not by becoming something new, but by preserving a shape that works well in calm, oxygen-rich environments. There are also Antarctic scallops that show little anatomical difference from relatives known in fossils dating to tens of millions of years ago. They rest on the seafloor, opening and closing slowly, filtering water that passes through. In warmer regions, scallops often develop features that help them escape predators, sometimes swimming or snapping away with sharp movements. In Antarctica, where fast hunters are rare in shallow waters, the simpler body form has endured without pressure to change. The stability of these lineages raises a deeper question. Why do some species remain recognizable across such long stretches of time, while others transform rapidly? Part of the answer lies in the unique isolation of the Southern Ocean. For millions of years, strong currents have circled the continent, separating its waters from warmer seas. This isolation creates a barrier that prevents many new species from arriving and limits competition. In such a setting, organisms that are already well suited to the environment do not need constant change to survive. Another reason is the extreme stability of temperatures. In many parts of the world, climate shifts force species to adapt quickly or disappear, but around Antarctica, the cold has remained nearly constant across long epochs. When a habitat changes slowly, evolution also proceeds slowly. Body plans that work are not replaced, only refined. This steadiness supports lineages that move through time with quiet persistence. Connections to prehistoric gigantism appear in more subtle ways. In ancient seas, long before the age of dinosaurs, oxygen levels in the ocean were sometimes high, and predation pressure in some environments remained low. Under those conditions, large body sizes appeared in several groups of invertebrates. Fossils from the Paleozoic era show giant sea scorpions and oversized trilobites that roamed ancient seafloors. Their worlds were not identical to Antarctica, but they shared similar ecological ingredients. Cold water is not required for gigantism, but the combination of stability, oxygen availability, and limited predators creates repeating patterns across history. The living species found in Antarctica today are not direct descendants of those ancient giants, yet they offer a modern reflection of how life responds when the environment remains steady for long periods. Slow metabolisms and long lifespans support growth that stretches across decades rather than years. When these factors remain unchanged over millions of years, the result is not only large body size, but the preservation of ancient forms. Some Antarctic worms provide another example. Their bodies are simple and elongated, much like early worms preserved in fossils from the Cambrian period. While their internal structures have evolved, the overall shape has not been pressured into complexity. In a world that rewards patience, not speed, the long and slender design continues to function. The idea of living fossils can be misunderstood. These species are not frozen in time, they continue to evolve, adapting in small ways to shifts in food, availability, changes in oxygen, and the slow movement of ice. But compared to species in rapidly changing environments, their evolution takes place at a different pace, guided by conditions that favor endurance over novelty. In the stillness of the Southern Ocean, ancient body plans persist because nothing forces them to vanish. The world beneath the Antarctic ice carries echoes of Earth's earlier oceans, not as replicas, but as survivors, shaped by the same quiet forces that once guided life when the planet was young. For many years, scientists studying the giants of Antarctica have searched for a single explanation that could tie all the pieces together. The cold water holds more oxygen, the predators are fewer, the metabolism of life slows almost to a whisper, the environment remains stable for millions of years. Each idea seems convincing on its own, yet none of them can fully explain why small creatures become large here more consistently than almost anywhere else on Earth. So the conversation continues, not as an argument of opposites, but as a quiet puzzle where each theory fits only part of the picture. The oxygen hypothesis is often the first idea people hear when they learn about Antarctic gigantism. Cold water can hold more dissolved oxygen than warm water, which means animals living here have access to greater oxygen supplies. For species that breathe through their skin or through tiny surfaces rather than lungs or gills, oxygen becomes a limiting factor for size. In warmer oceans, a creature that grows too large may not be able to deliver enough oxygen to its tissues to survive. In the Southern Ocean, that pressure is eased. Cells receive what they need even when the body stretches or thickens. This explains why sea spiders with no specialized breathing organs can reach sizes that look almost unreal. But the oxygen hypothesis does not solve everything. There are places in the deep sea with high oxygen where gigantism does not occur to the same extent. Some species in Antarctica remain small despite having access to abundant oxygen. This leads researchers to consider a second idea, known as the predation hypothesis. In many ecosystems, predators shape the size of prey. Where fast and aggressive hunters dominate, large and slow bodied animals struggle to survive. They are easier to catch and require more time to reproduce. In the Southern Ocean, shallow waters have fewer swift predators than similar regions elsewhere in the world. This is partly due to the long isolation of Antarctica and the extreme cold that limits which species can thrive. Without constant pressure from hunters, invertebrates have the freedom to explore body sizes that would be too risky in other environments. A giant amphipod does not need to dart away from fish that never appear. A large sea spider can walk slowly without fear that speed decides its fate. Yet the predation hypothesis also leaves questions unanswered. Some areas with low predation outside Antarctica do not produce giants, and some Antarctic species that could grow large do not. So researchers turn to another explanation, the metabolism hypothesis. Cold temperatures slow the chemical reactions that drive life. In warmer waters, animals burn energy quickly, grow rapidly, and often die young. In Antarctica, metabolism slows so much that life stretches across long spans of time. Growth is gradual, sometimes taking decades. Because energy demands are lower, animals can invest in building larger bodies without overwhelming their resources. A creature that eats infrequently can still sustain itself. Slow metabolism also reduces mutation rates, which means evolutionary changes occur over longer pathways, allowing traits like large size to persist without being replaced. But metabolism alone cannot explain why gigantism is not universal across all cold regions. The Arctic is also cold, yet its giants are fewer and smaller. This brings scientists to a fourth idea, the ecological stability hypothesis. Antarctica offers a level of environmental stability that is rare on Earth. For millions of years, temperatures have shifted slowly. The Antarctic circumpolar current isolates the continent, preventing warm waters from rushing in and protecting delicate ecosystems from sudden change. Seasonal cycles are predictable. Nutrients return to the water through upwelling. The calm world beneath sea ice provides shelter for species that depend on stillness. In such environments, life can afford to evolve. Slowly, body plans that work are not forced to change. Large sizes can persist because nothing interrupts the long timeline required to build them. However, stability alone does not create giants. There are stable environments in other parts of the world where organisms remain small. Stability may create the conditions in which gigantism can emerge, but it does not guarantee it. This is the heart of the debate. Each hypothesis explains part of the story, but none of them can stand alone. Oxygen allows large bodies to function. Reduced predation removes risks that large bodies would otherwise face. Slow metabolism supports long growth. Ecological stability preserves these traits across time. Remove any one of these factors, and the pattern weakens. Scientists now suggest that gigantism in Antarctica is not the result of a single driving force, but a rare combination of influences that overlap and reinforce one another. It is the cold that increases oxygen. It is the stillness that protects fragile forms. It is the long memory of the environment that keeps successful designs in place. Where other ecosystems shift quickly or contain intense competition, these forces break apart. In the Southern Ocean, they remain aligned. So the debate continues not as a search for a winner, but as a recognition that the mystery cannot be reduced to one simple answer. The giants of Antarctica are shaped by many threads woven together over millions of years. Oxygen, predators, metabolism, and stability all play their part, and it is the partnership of these forces, rather than any single cause, that allows small creatures to grow large in the frozen waters of the world's southern edge. In the quiet present of the Southern Ocean, the giants of Antarctica continue their slow routines without knowing that the world around them is beginning to change. Scientists who study these waters do not speak in dramatic forecasts or sudden tipping points. Instead, they describe what the next century may look like if current trends continue, drawing from gradual patterns already unfolding. The future of these oversized species will not arrive all at once. It will unfold in the same rhythm that shaped them, slowly, quietly, and over long stretches of time. Researchers expect that the Southern Ocean will continue to warm through the coming decades. The increases are projected to remain small when measured in degrees, yet meaningful in biological terms. A slight rise in temperature may reduce the oxygen held by the water, shift seasonal ice, and alter the flow of currents that once protected stable ecosystems. These changes will not erase the giants immediately. Instead, they may influence how large individuals can grow, how long they live, and how many young survive into adulthood. As sea ice thins and forms later each year, light will reach areas that have long remained dim. Some parts of the seafloor that once sat beneath a calm ceiling of ice may experience more movement from waves and currents. That shift could benefit certain species while challenging others. Fast-growing algae may expand in places where they were once scarce, feeding grazers that thrive on rapid cycles rather than slow accumulation. At the same time, fragile organisms adapted to stillness may lose the shelter that allowed them to stretch across decades. Food webs may reorganize in response. In regions where phytoplankton blooms begin earlier or peak at different times, small animals that depend on precise timing may fall out of sync. Krill populations are closely linked to seasonal ice, and changes in their abundance could ripple outward. For species that rely on long and predictable cycles, even minor disruptions may carry consequences felt for many years. Not all species will respond in the same way. Some may begin to shrink gradually as the environment favors smaller bodies that require less oxygen and energy. Others may shift their range into deeper and colder waters, retreating into places where conditions remain stable for longer. A few may adapt through subtle genetic changes that support survival under slightly altered temperatures. But for many Antarctic giants, adaptation will be limited by life history. Creatures that grow slowly and reproduce late cannot adjust quickly to rapid change. Scientists believe that some of the most vulnerable species are those that rely heavily on diffusion for breathing. Sea spiders and large worms fall into this group. Their ability to maintain large bodies depends on the movement of oxygen through their tissues without specialized organs. If oxygen levels decrease even modestly, future generations may reach smaller sizes or experience higher mortality in early life stages. These shifts would likely appear gradually, not as sudden loss, but as a quiet thinning of populations across time. Giant amphipods may face similar pressures, although their response could vary across regions. In areas where cold, deep water remains stable, they may continue to thrive. In shallower zones affected by warming and increased mixing, they may grow smaller or become less common. The outcome will not be uniform, reflecting the patchwork of microhabitats that make up the Antarctic shelf. Some species, however, are expected to endure. Long-lived sponges that anchor to the seafloor may persist in deep basins where temperatures change slowly. Their ability to survive long periods with limited food may allow them to withstand shifts in productivity better than species that rely on brief seasonal abundance. Certain jellyfish may also continue to succeed, especially those with flexible diets and wide distributions. Their bodies are less constrained by oxygen demands, and their life cycles may allow more rapid adjustments compared to slower invertebrates. There are also species that could expand rather than decline. As ice retreats, some fish and mobile predators from nearby waters may enter new regions. Their arrival may reshape ecosystems that have remained isolated for millions of years. For the giants that evolved under reduced predation, this shift could introduce pressures they have never faced. The change may not eliminate them entirely, but it could reduce their size, number, or distribution. Despite these concerns, scientists do not expect all Antarctic giants to vanish. Many will continue to survive in pockets of stable habitat, especially where deep cold water remains untouched by warming trends. The Southern Ocean is vast, and not all regions will respond at the same pace. Some may remain safe for centuries, allowing slow-growing species to continue their ancient rhythms even as other areas transform. The future of the giants is therefore not a single story, but many small paths unfolding at different speeds. Some species may grow smaller, some may retreat, some may persist almost unchanged, and a few may disappear from places where they once flourished. What lies ahead will not look like a sudden ending. It will resemble a long shift in balance, where the conditions that once encouraged extraordinary size begin to soften, and new limits shape the bodies that grow in the generations to come. The giants of Antarctica have endured ice ages, isolation, and ancient upheavals. Their future will depend on whether the changes now reaching their waters arrive slowly enough for patience to remain an advantage in a world that once rewarded stillness. Far from the warm currents that circle the rest of the planet, Antarctica remains a place shaped by conditions that seem almost impossible. Its waters stay close to freezing year after year. Its seasons stretch into long stretches of darkness and long stretches of light. Its isolation has lasted for millions of years, protected by the steady movement of the circumpolar current. In this cold and quiet world, life has not followed the familiar patterns seen elsewhere. Instead, it has grown in ways that feel unusual, patient, and deeply rooted in time. The giant creatures that live here are not accidents or rare exceptions. They are expressions of a system that has remained steady enough for small changes to accumulate slowly across countless generations. High oxygen in the cold water allows bodies to expand without strain. The absence of fast predators gives delicate forms the chance to grow without needing speed or armor. Slow metabolism stretches life across decades, allowing growth that unfolds in tiny increments. Stability acts as a foundation, protecting these traits long enough for them to deepen. All of these forces work together rather than separately. In other parts of the world, one or more pieces of this balance may exist, but rarely all at once. Some cold seas hold high oxygen, but strong predators keep invertebrates small. Some stable environments exist, but warm temperatures limit large body sizes. In Antarctica, the ingredients align. The result is an ecosystem that shows what life can become when the world moves slowly and when survival does not depend on constant urgency. The uniqueness of this system teaches something about possibility. It shows that the rules of biology are not fixed, only shaped by conditions. A sea spider can grow large without lungs. An amphipod that would fit beneath a fingernail elsewhere can fill the palm of a hand here. A worm that would normally remain hidden and small can stretch across the seafloor like a living thread. None of these creatures needed new inventions to achieve their size. They simply relied on old designs given time and opportunity. Antarctica also reminds us that evolution is not always a story of rapid innovation. Sometimes the most successful path is the quiet continuation of what already works. Many species here carry ancient body plans that have persisted across long ages. Their endurance shows that change is not the only measure of survival. In a world where the environment remains steady, evolution can move gently, refining rather than reinventing. This frozen ocean also reveals how deeply living systems depend on balance. Large bodies require energy, space, and favorable conditions. But when those conditions are met, life can expand into shapes that seem surprising only because they are rare. The giants of the Southern Ocean are not strange to themselves. They are simply shaped by a world that has been calm enough for their possibilities to unfold. Even the smallest organisms here reflect this quiet rhythm. Sponges grow year by year without rushing. Algae beneath the ice bloom in soft green clouds when the light returns. Tiny larvae drift in the stillness until they settle, beginning lives that may last longer than a human lifetime. Nothing in this system is hurried. Nothing is wasteful. Every movement feels connected to the slow breathing of the ocean. Looking at Antarctica from afar, it may seem harsh or empty. Yet beneath the surface, it contains one of the most intricate and delicate ecosystems on Earth. Its creatures do not shout for attention. They do not display vivid colors or fast movements. Instead, they reveal their complexity through patience. Their survival depends not on quick reactions, but on the long memory of an environment that allowed them to grow at a pace matched only by the turning of geological time. Ecosystems like this are rare. They show what life can do when it is given stillness instead of pressure, and time instead of urgency. They offer a different way of understanding adaptation, not as a race toward change, but as a relationship between organism and world that deepens slowly. As the story of this frozen ocean continues, the giants that inhabit it remain quietly present beneath the ice, moving through waters that have shaped them for longer than human history can measure. Their world stands as a reminder that life is not bound to a single pattern. It can grow quickly or slowly. It can shrink or expand. It can explore possibilities that seem unlikely in most places, yet perfectly natural in others. Here, at the farthest edge of the planet, life has chosen the gentle path. It has grown large without haste, endured without urgency, and filled a cold and silent sea with forms that reflect not only survival, but the patient unfolding of possibility.